Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back again once more to the Retro Racing Managers League, brought to you by Racing Voice in association with XL5 Media. I'm Jake Sanson. We're back in action once again for the Grand Prix World Championship, the 1991 season, alive and kicking with 4 races still to go. A big battle awaits us at the Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez de la Frontera. First of all, we'll kick off with pre-qualifying, half-distance race of course, and the top 3 teams from pre-qualifying get themselves into the main event. So without further ado, let's see who's in the best position to get their cars into the race itself. It's an all-Eurobrun front row with Adrian Fernandez and Eddie Cheever on the front row of the grid. Aguri Suzuki is third position for Honda. Perry McCarthy in the Duracell AGS, P4 on the grid. Then Andy Wallace and Naoki Hattori in the mix in row 3. Hideki Noda is there in the second AGS, P7 ahead of Eric Bernard. Then Carl Wendlinger in the second of the 2 Jordans in the top 10 with Paul Tracy. Roberto Moreno lining up alongside Nicola Larini. It'll be a tough battle for them. Jean-Marc Gounod for Renault in front of the Fonmetal of Roland Ratzenberger. Then Alex Zanardi and Tommy Byrne. Alan McNish is there with Emanuele Pirro. And then Andrea De Cesaris lines up in front of his countryman Pierluigi Martini. Should be an interesting challenge for them. Then it's going to be Stefan Johansson and Ivan Capelli making a very solid run of it as we continue on in fine formation. Eric Comas in front of Joe Winkelhock, Martin Donnelly and Rickard Rydell. We're in for a very tough race out there and a very staunch battle between our contenders. Let's see how it all kicks off at the start of this race. Fernandez and Cheever, front row of the grid. Very rare that the Eurobruns managed to knock the Hondas off the front row of the grid. They didn't quite get the qualifying pace they wanted to, the Honda team. Let's see what happens as we go into the race. We're off. Let's race at Jerez. And it's a perfect start for Eddie Cheever. Cheever's got the launch in front of Fernandez. Suzuki's got a good start as well. Looks like Fernandez is going to drop down to P3 as they go through the first corner. So already some big movements as they work their way through. We're on board with Roland Ratzenberger, tiptoeing his way through the first turn behind Alex Zanardi in the Monteverdi. Going to make a big dive to the inside line there into turn 2. Oh, and he's nudged him. He's actually nerved him sideways. Zanardi's not going to take very kindly to that. And he's still there, look, to his left-hand side. So Zanardi and Ratzenberger going wheel to wheel on this first lap of the race here at Jerez. Both drivers wanting to put their teams into the event. But look at this, Suzuki is already all over Eddie Cheever like a bad habit as they run to the hairpin for the first time. And that's Andy Wallace diving in on Carl Wendlinger. His teammate, Wendlinger gets the move on Wallace, I should say. So the Jordans look like they've swapped positions as they work their way through. So, and that's Alex Zanardi. That's Zanardi off the road. Right, we just saw Zanardi battling away with Ratzenberger, so what's going on? We'll have a double check. Are we about to see the Fonmetal dive up the inside? Yes, we are. Is it a bit of an aggressive move? It is, and he's nerfed him again. And this time, Zanardi's gone clean off the road. Well, very big disappointment then for Zanardi, and I've got a feeling that the Monteverdi team are going to be absolutely livid with that outcome. On board with Paul Tracy, the Canadian. So Paul Tracy in the Modena Lamborghini, trying to chase down Naoki Hattori. The Sega Honda team obviously still trying to continue on with their new restructure after the split with Leighton House and March. So we're no longer going to be part of their operation from 1992 onwards. Honda will take the whole thing in-house and it'll be a factory effort moving forward. Speaking of a factory effort moving forward, it's going to be Ford that takes over this team as well, as Eurobrun is going to be passed here by Aguri Suzuki down on the inside. Suzuki takes the lead into turn 1, and it's a perfect move as he gets his overtaking there and into the lead of the race. Cheever in second, then Fernandez, McCarthy and Hideki Noda in the second of the Duracell AGS cars. So McCarthy and Noda doing a great job. It looks as though at the moment it's going to be Honda and then Eurobrun and AGS that get their way through into the Spanish Grand Prix, which will be the race after this one. So Jean-Marc Gounod in the Renault, piling up over the top of the crest, and the Renault team still trying to find some decent pace. Haven't quite found it. Fernandez has lost out to his, has managed to get past his teammate, Cheever. Cheever's down to third. That must have been a move at the hairpin there. He was so busy riding on board with the Renault of Gounod that clearly Fernandez has dropped into second position now ahead of Cheever. There it is. So Cheever, having led the race early doors, has now let his teammate go. So Fernandez started on pole. Cheever took the initial lead, but Suzuki is leading it now. And look at the Mexican. Adrian Fernandez is absolutely stepping up to the plate. Really wants to push his way further forward as we ride on board with Donnelly. Oh, bit of a moment in front of him. That is the Dallara. Having a little bit of a headache in front. I think that might be Emanuele Pirro, who's having a little bit of a duel at the tail end of the field. Some good battles in the early part of the race as Aguri Suzuki has already pulled 0.7 of a second out on Adrian Fernandez, the Honda driver getting himself into familiar territory as he runs in at the sharp end of the field. There's Martini, so Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi trying to close up on the Zach Speed in front, but it looks like he might be losing out here to the Coloni. Well, I thought he was going to get through, but it isn't the case in the end as the Coloni decides to bail out of the move. This is a great race circuit for the Grand Prix World Championship. Plenty of overtaking opportunities likely to be seen around the course here. And we'll see some really stunning battles all the way through. Down to the braking zone. There is Adrian Fernandez. Now really closing up on Suzuki. The Honda doesn't have the pace at this particular early part of the race. Fernandez is unlocking that speed that he found in qualifying to put the car in pole position in the first place. And they are having a bit of a race of it, these two. As Naoki Hattori... Oh, a bit of a lock-up there as he tried to carry a lot of speed through the left-hander up towards the stadium-esque section of the course where all of the banks are full of spectators. So Hattori was very lucky he didn't pirouette the car there. Meanwhile, Cheever is under pressure from Perry McCarthy. So McCarthy in the AGS is going after Cheever. I wonder if Eddie Cheever's got a slow problem developing here because he is dropping quite a long way back off the pack. There's Joe Winkelhock. Winkelhock, 18th position at the moment, trying to chase down the two cars in front as Wallace is in trouble by the look of it. Andy Wallace is coming into the pits. Andy Wallace is in pit road. So what's happened to Andy Wallace? The Jordan is in the pit lane. We need to fast forward through the field and figure out what's happened. Oh my goodness, he's got a loose wheel. Well, that is devastating for the Jordan team. Now, whether he's had contact with somebody or not, I'm not entirely sure. But the after effect is very much the same. So Andy Wallace having to come into the pits then to sort out the loose wheel. And that really does hamper his progress as he will drop to the back of the grid now in the early phases of this pre-qualifying sprint. Through they go, up to the far end of the course. And look at Fernandez really hustling Suzuki. He's going to have the slipstream down the back straight. And surely Fernandez will have the pace and the opportunity to dive in at the hairpin and go for the overtaking move on Aguri Suzuki. There's nothing that the Japanese driver can do to fight back. Through goes Fernandez. Adrian Fernandez then takes the lead here at Jerez. And it's a bold lunge from the Mexican, but he makes it work. So Fernandez into the lead here in the build-up to the Spanish Grand Prix of 1991. And the Eurobrun has got into the lead of the race here in front of Suzuki. Perry McCarthy, P3, and Paul Tracy on the move. Nice overtake there on Hideki Noda. So he gets past the Japanese driver. So Hideki Noda now down into 8th position. Paul Tracy getting the move he needed there to make his advantage and get up another position. So now he's going to be chasing down the Austrian Karl Wendlinger in the leading Jordan. I wonder if Andy Wallace moved over and let Wendlinger through because he knew that wheel problem was occurring and decided to play the team game and get out of the way. So certainly Suzuki trying to stay with Fernandez at the moment. Very rare that the Honda doesn't have the pace of the Eurobrun Ford. They've had a topsy-turvy season of Honda. It's not been a bed of roses for them by any stretch. They've had a lot of success, but they've had a lot of controversy as well. Perry McCarthy in the AGS, still going strong as Stefan Johansson is trying to step up the attack on the Renault. And there's a lot of rumblings coming out of the Renault team, which of course bought out the Reynard outfit earlier this season. Kind of cannibalized the chassis to make it more of a Renault factory deal. They're going to make it a completely independent race team from 1992. But Reynard were having problems, and so Renault basically rebadged the Reynard for the remainder of this season, and for the 92 season it's going to be a full works effort. And Stefan Johansson trying to make the bid then on the inside line, and that'll do nicely. Good effort there from the Swede. So now the Renault driver is going to be chasing after the likes of Ratzenberger and the Coloni, which is just behind. I think that is the car of Andrea de Cesaris. So there is Fernandez starting to stretch out the lead now in the Eurobrun Ford. Great to see that Ford are going to go full-time factory race effort in 1992, having supplied engines to cars for years and years. It's going to be interesting to see how Ford goes about it, whether they race under the blue oval banner of the Ford Motor Company or whether they'll have one of their luxury brands be the badge of the team. Here is Perry McCarthy on the AGS team front. Their fantastic Duracell race team livery. It does look like a moving racing battery. Very good marketing from the Jerez team. Harry McCarthy having a great race here, and this is perfect timing because, of course, this is the time of the year with 4 races left in the championship when drivers in the sprint are going to be trying to put themselves in the frame for a race drive in the full-time outfit as Johansson locks up the Renault Reynard and manages to get a little bit crossed up there through turn 2, and as a result is holding up the field somewhat. And I do believe that Shiva has lost another position. He's dropped back to P6 now. So McCarthy's into 3rd, Hattori is into 4th place, Wendlinger has just moved up into P5. So that's the Jordan now in the top 5 positions as Martini gets a run on the inside, and that's a good overtaking move there for 18th from Martini in the Minardi, and his next target is going to be Stefan Johansson in that slightly askew Reynard Renault. So Perry McCarthy, 3rd position, under pressure though from Naoki Hattori, as we ride on board with Hideki Noda, the Japanese driver, as he watches Chiva and Tracy go to battle a little further up the way. A few seconds back, we've got Eric Bernard and Nicola Larini dueling over 9th position. And don't forget, of course, in these sprint races, these shorter distance pre-qualifying races for the 13 teams trying to break into the Grand Prix, it's only the top 3 teams that can get 1 car across the finish line. You don't have to get 2 cars across the finish line, just 1. Some people have argued that it would be better if they could get both cars across the finish line to qualify, but then that would rather defeat the object of trying to win a race. If your teammate drops out, then at least the sister car can still go for the win. So suggestions that it would only be the first 3 teams to get both cars over the line that would get through were very quickly stamped out in the rumours in the paddock. Eddie Cheever about to lose out here to Tracy. So Tracy now gets through into P6. The Canadian has got up into the top 6. Eddie Cheever is having a real struggle. Fernandez is disappearing out into the distance with his Eurobrun Ford, and the sister car being driven by Eddie Cheever is like a mobile chicane at the moment. We watch Carl Wendlinger really settling into his berth at Jordan. This is one of the teams of the season amongst the rookie brigade, and there's already a lot of talk that they'll be even stronger for 1992. They've got a lot of interested parties on the financial front. There's going to be a big step up from the Jordan squad in 1992. And of course, there's even a chance that they may even end up with the point scores that they've had so far. They could even end up in the top 10 of the Constructors' Championship by the end of the season, which means they wouldn't have to pre-qualify. Fernandez, 2.7 now ahead of Aguri Suzuki. Very solid race. Here's Larini. Larini's going to lose out to Moreno here by the look of it into turn 1. Well, the director changing position around the course at the worst possible moment because Moreno was finishing off the move there on Nicola Larini, and he does get in front. But as a result, we end up going down towards Stefan Johansson, who's chasing Roland Ratzenberger in the Fondmetal. Now, the Fondmetal has had a very mixed season so far, but all the signs are there that this is a car that could do better in 1992, and they are going to be committing to a full-time campaign next year. We are going to be talking about who is signed up and who is confirmed at which team for 1992 during the Grand Prix broadcast a little later on. For the moment, we're just watching these guys go to battle. On the inside, Johansson is going to make the bid. Ratzenberger on the lock stops, trying to slow the car down for the hairpin. That got messy. That got very messy very quickly there for Ratzenberger, as he finds himself in a rock and a hard place there, trying to slow the car down for the hairpin. So a bit of a tricky situation for the contenders. But it will be a very interesting situation if we can get... Oh, that's Pirro! Pirro's gone clean off the road in the Dallara. Now, we didn't see what happened to him, but certainly a big moment. And that's definitely caused a lot of issues there. So it'll be a bit of a tricky situation for all of the contenders in this one. But Emanuele Pirro, look, has broken the front nose cone with that little off. So it'll be tricky now to see how much time he's actually going to lose. The answer to that one is very clearly going to be a lot. And Martini's in. So Pierluigi Martini, it looks like a technical difficulty with the Minardi as well. So that's 2 cars in the space of 20 seconds or so hitting trouble. But both drivers had the forethought and the foresight to be able to bring their cars back into position without too much difficulty. Shiva is really struggling here. yet more lockups with the car. This is definitely not going well as far as he's concerned. This is a very tricky scenario for everybody. But it's going to be a very tough race for him if he can't find any pace of this car. So far, he's dropped all the way to 7th place, 14 seconds off his teammate. There is Adrian Fernandez. And these are the kind of differing performances with the same team, with the same equipment, that drivers start getting in their heads, going, are they favouring one driver over another? And certainly the way that Adrian Fernandez is flying out in front, even pulling clear of Aguri Suzuki in the Honda, it's clear that the Ford outfit have really found a way to step up the attack on this Eurobrun. Very fast machine, as we know, and the team are very well drilled in trying to make improvements as Perry McCarthy drops Hattori. So the Honda team are not in their best form, that is for sure. They've had dominant races over the course of this year, but this is going to be anything but dominant the way things are currently stacked up. If you are watching along, do comment on the chat box. It would be great to hear from those who are watching along what your thoughts and predictions are for this race, and of course for the Grand Prix later on as well, the Spanish Grand Prix. Who do we think is going to favour this Jerez circuit and get the most out of it? There's Pierluigi Martini having recovered. So the Minardi is down at the very back of the field, unfortunately. There's only one car behind it, and that is going to be the car belonging to Emanuele Pirro. Everybody else is just going to take their time and keep the statistics favourable to move their way forward in the early phase of this race. We're on lap 10 out of the 35, 9 laps completed. There's Perry McCarthy, still trying to chase down the leaders as Fernandez will cross the line this time by, and that will put him onto lap number 11. He does so now, and so 10 laps completed. We are just under 1/3 distance of this sprint qualifier. Top 3 cars across the finish line from 3 different teams. Those 3 teams will be in the race, along with the top 10 race teams from Grand Prix. It's a really exciting addition to our broadcast lineup for the 1992 season. Our broadcasters, RRML TV, have informed us that they're going to be covering several race championships from the 1992 season. They won't just be covering Grand Prix, they will also be covering the Formula 2 series, just one league below. Also the Super Touring World Cup, which is going to be reignited for next season for teams in the Super Touring world of touring car racing. We're also going to get the Sports Car World Championship for Group C's, and even some IndyCar races next year from the Indy racing out in America. Nicola Larini diving up the inside line. Oh, very nicely handled. Larini made Moreno look like he was standing still in the braking zone. Very nicely done. As now Larini chases down Eric Bernard. We watch Aguri Suzuki working his way through the chicane, and that is the Renault Reynard. I'm very much looking forward to 1992 when Reynard are not going to have any say in the building of that Renault. They just cannibalised the chassis, as I mentioned earlier on, to take over the Reynard team, which ran out of funds just before the French Grand Prix. Renault saw an opportunity, bought out the team, repainted the cars, and they're going to be a very strong lineup next year. There's even rumours that a certain departed Brabham driver, Alain Prost, is in talks with the Renault team. It'll be fascinating to see as Carl Wendlinger loses the How did he save that? Brilliant control from Carl Wendlinger. The Austrian had chucked that away in turn 1. That was a big mistake from the Austrian, but how he saved that, I do not know. Great control from Carl Wendlinger. That is why Topher Smith hired him. When the chips are down and his back's against the ropes, he knows how to get himself out of a jam. So great work from Carl Wendlinger. Any lesser a driver would have thrown that away, but that's why he's under pressure, because here comes Paul Tracy, dives up the inside, gets the manoeuvre to move up into 5th position. So Wendlinger just has to let the Martini-sponsored Modena Lamborghini go through. A lot of rumours that Lamborghini are going to take over that team full-time from 1992 onwards. There is Aguri Suzuki in 2nd position in front of McCarthy, Hattori, and now, of course, it's Tracy in P5 ahead of Wendlinger, Chiva, Noda, Bernard, and Nicola Larini. Down to the braking zone for the hairpin. You can see how much ground McCarthy is gaining now on Suzuki. And I have to say, Hattori is gaining on him as well. So Hattori's closing up on McCarthy. McCarthy's getting closer to Suzuki. Is all not quite well at Honda. And certainly for Aguri Suzuki, that would be a very dramatic end to the race for him if he's got some kind of technical difficulty. Fernandez has just dropped him, look. He's well clear. And the Mexican driving masterfully at the moment, really making good work of things. So this is a really solid and smooth race at the moment for the man in the lead of the race. There's Perry McCarthy in the AGS. But so far so good. Onto the back straight and chasing them down. There's Ivan Capelli. Having a bit of a difficult race at the moment. The Monteverdis have not had the pace here in Spain. There's a lot of conversation about what their form is going to be like for 1992. But we're going to see some really intriguing news fly into the wire for the 1992 season. A lot of great drivers making a big impression on the sport for next year. There is Perry McCarthy working his way forward. Trying to drop Naoki Hattori, and see how difficult that is to do at the moment. Hattori is really not making this easy going. There's going to be some interesting changes to the lineup for this round of the championship. I know that a couple of the teams are using these last two European races in Spain and in Germany for the European Grand Prix, which will be held on the new configuration of the Nürburgring at the Grand Prix circuit, which was opened 7 years ago in 1984. Andy Wallace swarming around behind the Monteverdi as Andy Wallace tries to make up for the lost time earlier on, and surely this could be an easy overtake down to the chicane. Well, he's got to be brave, but he's also got to be very mindful that if he just chucks it on the inside and the Monteverdi turns in on him, then that's going to be game over anyway. He's got a lot of recovery work to do. And of course his teammate Carl Wendlinger is not finding it particularly easy, as that's Tommy Byrne locking up with the Zaxby BMW. He's going through the hairpin. Slightly different appearance to that car for the latter end of the season. They've done a rather short-term deal to end the season with the Coca-Cola company. They've put their drinks brand 7-Up on the car, and there's also a very intriguing new sponsor on the car as well on the side pods. You'll notice it for yourselves as it goes by. Adrian Fernandez. 6 seconds clear of Aguri Suzuki as Alan McNish goes to move on the inside in the Real. So that's the Real getting ahead of the Renault. No problems at all for Alan McNish. He really makes light work of Jean-Marc Gounod. He was having a much easier time of things than Stefan Johansson, I have to say. He was looking rather uncomfortable in that car, considering that Stefan Johansson is a former Ferrari and McLaren driver. Never won a Grand Prix for them, of course. But for a driver of his stature to be struggling so much with that Renault, it tells you a lot about the way that it's been set up. Renault are rather looking forward to getting their hands on their 1992 car. A lot of excitement around that team for next year. Expect big things from Renault in the 92 season. Meanwhile, for Real, Alan McNish is currently sorting things out ahead of Jean-Marc Gounod. So it's all looking neat and tidy for him as he works his way through. And on the far side of the course, there's Perry McCarthy, still running in P3 in the Duracell AGS. Down the back straight, looking very smooth indeed. Trying to chase down Aguri Suzuki. So far, so good for Eurobrun, Honda, and AGS. They're the three teams that are going to go through to the Grand Prix. As we approach the half-distance mark, we're not quite there yet, but we're not far away from one half of the way through this sprint race, which will sort out the top 3 teams in this race, which will go and join the main 10 teams from the world of Grand Prix racing. They'll join the likes of the Ferraris, the Williamses, the McLarens, and all of the main competitors in the Grand Prix world in 1991. Stefan Johansson diving up the inside line, making the bid there to get through on Joe Winkelhock. And that'll do nicely for Johansson. That's P15 now. So he works his way forward. And that's put the Renaults into the top half of our timing screen. Both cars fairly close together now for Gounod and Johansson. As we look at Pierluigi Martini, still struggling after his earlier pit stop with the Minardi. They're hoping for a little bit more. You'll notice that their partnership with Glenfiddich seems to have come to an end. That logo has now come off the Minardi. So it'll be fascinating to see what their new branding and target marketing is going to be for 1992. They had a lot of Scottish influence this year in terms of the marketing and management side. I'll be fascinated to see what happens to the Minardi outfit in 92 as will everybody for every team. Not that far away from it now, of course. 4 races to go, including this one. And then, of course, after this particular event, we will have the racing take place on the Nürburgring for the European Grand Prix, and then we'll have the last 2 races of the year, the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, and then the Australian Grand Prix on the streets of Adelaide to close up the season. And the championship battle really is starting to heat up in the Grand Prix World Championship. I can't wait for the Spanish Grand Prix later. It's going to be a really exciting race, as Fernandez has now got just under 20 laps to go. When he crosses the line, there'll be 19 left as he continues to push. 7 seconds clear now of Aguri Suzuki. This is going so well for the Eurobrun driver. He's really looking very neat and tidy. Perry McCarthy still keeping the AGS in a good position here in front of Hattori. And this is a great little midfield battle. Gunon is really pushing McNish, who's got a problem. McNish gets out of the way, and Gunon goes right round the outside of him. So that looked like there was an issue there for McNish. He pulled to the inside line, and Gunon just drove around the outside of him. A very strong move there from the Frenchman. Not entirely sure what that was all about, and certainly the explanations don't seem to be particularly forthcoming. But it's very neat and tidy for the moment, as there is your man Pierluigi Martini still trying to make progress. McNish is dropping down the field. So clearly Alain McNish in the Real has got a serious problem brewing. The Gunon made it look easy, and Alain McNish is indeed in the pit lane. So I wonder if there was a technical difficulty of some kind, maybe an electrical problem. Whatever it was, it's brought Alain McNish into the pits, and he will drop to the back of the field now. So Gunon able to make good advantage of that to get into 12th position. His teammate Stefan Johansson tucked up behind the colony of Andrea De Cesaris now, who is in 13th position. As we watch Aguri Suzuki in the Honda, trying to get well clear of McCarthy. He doesn't want any pressure from the AGS driver behind him. So hopefully, as this race continues to brew, it's going to be a very neat and tidy one. As Fernandez is in pit road. The race leader. So Fernandez comes into the pits then, and that will be his 1 pit stop in this race. Now, the regulations are a little bit fluid in the warm-up race. They don't have to make a pit stop if they don't want to, but they have often found that making a pit stop mid-race is the faster strategy. And Naoki Hattori has come into the pits as well. So too has Tracy, so too has Wendlinger. So it's a hive of activity in pit road now, with Suzuki leading the way from McCarthy. And up to 3rd position now will come Fernandez. So he's only lost 2 positions, as there goes Chiva past the pits in front of Noda. So for the first time in this race, the Eurobruns are together on track. Chiva's tyres are up to temperature, of course, although they're quite worn by the look of it. So now Chiva will be tucked up behind Fernandez. Stefan Johansson comes into the pits as well for Renault, as does Moreno for Coloni. Onto the far side of the course, and then dropping down to the back part of the circuit. Ricard Rydell has brought his car into the pits as well. That's the second of the Reals. Although, of course, he's now the first of the Reals with that pit stop for Alain McNish, as he dropped all the way to the tail end of the field. So Aguri Suzuki now leads the race. Eric Comas there in the second of the Minardis, in front of his teammate Pierluigi Martini. Now Martini has already made a pit stop. He can probably take that car through to the end of the race now, but how compliant are the Minardi teammates feeling with each other, as Comas and Martini run very closely together in tight proximity. They don't want to cause themselves too many headaches here, but at the same time, it's very clear that we're going to have a very tough race of it. Tommy Byrne is going to lose out here. Inside line, good move from the Monteverdi, as Perry McCarthy and Aguri Suzuki are both into the pits together. So this is going to be an important one as far as the development of this race is concerned. They're both going to come into the pits together, and then they will exit fairly closely together. But Fernandez is going to take the lead naturally. Chiva into 2nd place now, of course. Here comes the Modena Lamborghini going into turn 1. That's Eric Bernard, and he will rejoin. And Martin Donnelly has dropped out of the race by the look of it. So Martin Donnelly is in trouble. There is the graphic on the screen. So Martin Donnelly's had some problems. So he now joins the retirement race. And that's very unfortunate indeed for Donnelly. So we're going to try and find out what happened to Martin Donnelly. How close was that on the exit of the pit? Oh, there was contact. There was actually contact as Aguri Suzuki is barged out of the way by the AGS. And there's Martin Donnelly's car being recovered. But Aguri Suzuki was barged aside there by the AGS. That is controversial, and that's going to be looked into. They came out of the pits practically together. Was that McCarthy getting through, or was that Hideki Noda getting through? Oh, that's why Martin Donnelly retired from the race. His engine was on fire. So that's nice and clear now. We know what the situation was. But more controversially than that, we've had the leaders come out of the pits after their stop, and there's definite contact between Hideki Noda, the Japanese driver, and his countryman, Aguri Suzuki. So Suzuki's not going to be very happy at all with the way that Hideki Noda barged him out of the way in the first corner. That's definitely going to be investigated. That's big drama in this race, that's for sure, as we watch Adrian Fernandez back into the lead of the race once more. Suzuki has already got ahead of Noda to retake third position, but AGS have got to be careful, because if Noda gets a penalty, then it's all going to be on McCarthy. So there's Eric Bernard trying to put the Modena Lamborghini team up the order. Zooming past McCarthy. That was a little too quick to be a clean move. I wonder if McCarthy's got an issue with the AGS. That was so easy for him to get through. And Hattori's got ahead of McCarthy as well. Yeah, there's definitely a problem for Perry McCarthy. He's dropping like a stone, and that's so unfortunate for Perry McCarthy. Bernard made it easy to get through. Hattori getting through. And McCarthy, yes, look, Moreno's dropping into 12th position now ahead of Zanardi. So Moreno getting an overtaking move. And McCarthy comes into the pits. So McCarthy is in pit lane. And that is big drama for the AGS team then. Why is he in pit lane? We will try and find out. But certainly Perry McCarthy with a big problem, and that drops him down the field as we watch Ricard Rydell in the Real very nearly skate off the road there, down at the back end of the field. Well, apparently it's an electrical issue for Perry McCarthy, so that's game over in the fight for progression for the AGS team. They've got to rest all their hopes now on Hideki Noda. And of course, Hideki Noda is currently under fire for that incident for nudging Suzuki out of the way. Suzuki did get through, so we've got to wait and see what happens. Hattori has caught and passed Bernard. So Hattori has got through into 5th position, and there is Carl Wendlinger making the bid then on Jean-Marc Gounod in the Renault. So Wendlinger up into 8th position. What a fight back from Carl Wendlinger. Great to see the Jordan driver really stretching his legs out there. As there is Aguri Suzuki in the Honda, and now Perry McCarthy trying to fight back after his pit stop. Look at him charge through. He's already got up past Tommy Byrne in the Zakspeed, who is now into the clutches of the Dallara of Nicola Larini, and now it's going to be a big charge forward for McCarthy to take on Zanardi. A lot of time lost for McCarthy, but it's not over yet. 15 laps to go, and there's McCarthy making another big move on Zanardi. Oh, lightning pace from Perry McCarthy, definitely getting into his stride. And this is a driver you really want to watch out for, Perry McCarthy. He is turning into a bit of a superstar in this race. May have had some electrical problems or technical difficulties with the car. Definitely not his making, but he's bouncing back in fine style as we watch Fernandez pull 8 seconds clear now of Chiva. That is a monstrous turn of pace. Chiva losing another second or so. And there is Chiva. Hemorrhaging time to Aguri Suzuki, and there behind is Noda in the AGS, trying to keep them in the race for the time being. And certainly if he stays in 3rd place, Stefan Johansson dives in and gets the move there on Eric Comas in the Minardi. So nicely handled there from Stefan Johansson, another decent overtake for the Renault, while the sister car of Jean-Marc Gounod is now in the top 10 quite firmly. But Eddie Cheever is losing a second per sector by the look of it, as Moreno now gets his run on the inside of Roland Ratzenberger. That'll put him into 10th place. So a good bit of racing, and it looks as though the Modena Lamborghini team have swapped positions. So Tracy has now got ahead of Eric Bernard. So some good tactics, some good strategy there. But Aguri Suzuki in the Honda, chasing down Eddie Cheever, who is really struggling. He's lost another second in the last sector. So he's currently going about 3 seconds a lap slower than his own teammate. Well, that is drama all the way. Naoki Hattori now making his bid on Hideki Noda, and he gets through. So Noda loses the position. And so Hideki Noda now trying to continue to charge his way further away from the field. But Hideki Noda just taking a very neat and tidy run of it as he continues in front of Tracy and Bernard. Poor Tracy's got the AGS firmly in its sights. If Tracy can catch and pass Hideki Noda, then the Modena Lamborghini team get through. If there are any problems at Modena Lamborghini, of course, Carl Wendlinger in the Jordan is waiting in the wings. God, if they hadn't had their problems for Wallace and Wendlinger, they would be up there and they would be fighting for the top 3 in this race overall. But look at Chiva really struggling to hold off a Goody Suzuki. Surely Suzuki's going to make the bid here to the inside line, dives in. Oh, and Chiva turns in on him. He desperately tries to keep him back, but he can't do it. Oh, great racing between the two of them as Chiva desperately tried to turn in there on Suzuki, but he couldn't stop the Japanese driver getting through. So Aguri Suzuki comes through into position. Absolutely sensational racing, and they continue on their charge forward. So out through the hairpin. Suzuki now into second place in the Honda. And we ride on board with Adrian Fernandez, who's just 13 laps away. Oh, Hideki Noda getting it wrong in the hairpin. Clearly under pressure from Paul Tracy. There he is in the background. And that is the move that will get the Modena Lamborghini team into this race. They want to compete in the Spanish Grand Prix. And the only way to do that is to get ahead of Hideki Noda in the AGS. The top 3 teams across the line will be the ones in the Grand Prix. And we've got a Eurobrun, a Honda, a Eurobrun and a Honda up front. So the third team is going to be either AGS, Lamborghini or Jordan at the moment. And that's Ratzenberger pulling into the pits, getting out of the way of Ivan Capelli. So they've got a problem. Oh, it's a throttle issue for Roland Ratzenberger, a stuck throttle. And that brings him into the pits. That's going to be a real headache for the Austrian or the Von Metal team. Not what they needed. The pit crew is there to receive him, but it's no comfort for Roland Ratzenberger whatsoever. Very difficult situation. Through they go again. And it's all going well for Chiva. Third position, tucking up behind Aguri Suzuki. He tried his best to thwart the Japanese driver, but there was no way through. And there's Perry McCarthy still pushing the AGS to try and at least get back into the top 10 in the hope that he's moving his way further forward. Just to get close to Moreno. Making good work of things at the moment to try and close the gap down to the man in front. Roberto Moreno hoping for the top 10 finish, but Perry McCarthy, frustrated after technical difficulties with the car, is definitely not finding it particularly easy. Here's Stefan Johansson trying to get the move on Capelli. Capelli slams the door shut in the Reynard Renault's face. As Hideki Noda is in P6. Tracy got ahead of him. We didn't see the move, but Tracy is now in front of Hideki Noda. So Paul Tracy has put the Modena Lamborghini in front of the Duracell AGS, and that's going to mean we've got 3 teams now looking good to compete in the Spanish Grand Prix later on this afternoon. And that is going to be the way it works out. Just 1 retirement so far in a very attrition-free race at the moment. Martin Donnelly, the only retirement from the race with a blown engine. Just shows you how hard the teams have been working on their reliability over the season. Those upgrades have really started to pay dividends. Through they come again as Fernandez leads. Suzuki in second from Chiva, Hattori, and then Tracy and Noda. We're watching Moreno trying desperately to get away from Perry McCarthy, who is bouncing back in style in this race. A top 10 finish is more than likely and could well be on the cards. Eddie Chiva. There's a lot of rumbling about Coloni. We were just looking at Moreno. Apparently the Rallying Kings Subaru are desperate to get involved on a more full-time basis with Coloni next year. Is the move on the inside from the from the Reynard Renault again. I've done it again. As diving through, that's Gunnar who gets the move. And that's Johansson getting the overtaking move there as well, I think, actually. My apologies. So the Reynard Renault having a bit of a race of it as Emanuele Pirro goes out of the way of Ratzenberger. He's got an electrical issue, so Emanuele Pirro is going to pull off down the back straight, as Fernandez goes through. So after his off earlier on to have a broken front wing repaired, Emanuele Pirro is going to bring his car to a standstill, and that is game over for the Italian in the Dallara. Major disappointment then for Emanuele Pirro, not what he needed from this at all. And so big disappointment as far as he is concerned. That will not help his and the team's standing as they continue to make progress and move forward. So big disappointment all round. Here's De Cesaris. De Cesaris dives in then to try and get the move on the Monteverde of Capelli. His teammate Zanardi is now ahead of him. As we ride on board once again with Pierluigi Martini, once in the top half of the field, now trying to fight his way back from the back half of the field. It looks good so far for Eurobrunn with their Ford dealership. That's going to be a full-time factory effort from Ford Motor Company next year, as the Eurobrunn team are going to pull back from Grand Prix racing to focus on their sports car program next year. Up the inside line, Joe Winkelhock getting the overtaking move then into the hairpin. Makes the overtake then in the Zach Speed BMW. Very solid effort. Rumblings about BMW wanting to come into the sport full-time now. Grand Prix racing getting so attractive to some of these major car manufacturers. And a lot of talks about whether BMW will have more of a say in their own Grand Prix team next season. Ivan Capelli trying to chase his way back into position. The man in front of him is the man who's just been on board with us to make the overtake. Joe Winkelhock in the Zach Speed. So it's been a very tough race of it so far. Some very good performances. Eddie Cheever locks up the car. Oh, Eddie Cheever finding that he's not just got one Honda to deal with, he's going to have the other one now as well. So Naoki Hattori all over the back of Eddie Cheever. Can he make the same move in the same place? He's going to try his best. He'll dive in for the inside line. Again, Eddie Cheever will try and block it. But again, he can't make it happen. He actually nearly goes off the road in the attempt to keep Naoki Hattori back behind him. But Hattori does get the move, and into third position he goes. 10 laps left of the sprint half of the Grand Prix weekend. So no problems at all for Naoki Hattori to get into third position. There's his teammate Aguri Suzuki getting through into second place. So Fernandez leads Suzuki, Hattori, Cheever, and then Tracy. So we're going to have 3 teams confirmed very soon indeed. 10 laps left in this, of course. The AGS are now out of the race to get in. They need to get back ahead of at least the Lamborghini. And Jean-Marc Gounod pulling off. There's a water leak in the Reynard Renault. So Jean-Marc Gounod's fairly fluid drive has now got no fluid left, as the water has leaked out of the Reynard Renault and it's all gone pear-shaped. So now Stefan Johansson is the lead Renault, but I'm afraid he's not going to get anything from this race, being down in 14th position. So right at the end of this race then, cars are starting to drop out as the Spanish sunshine really starts to pay dividends now. It'll be a very interesting challenge for some of these cars as Andrea De Cesaris comes into the pits now, so that's not in the schedule. That'll be a problem for the Coloni. So difficulties then for Andrea De Cesaris and the team. They're going to have to work their way further forward. More good battles as Fernandez leads 14 seconds clear of Aguri Suzuki. It's been a perfect race so far from the Mexican. So Adrian Fernandez holding his nerve. Suzuki and Hattori second and third places in front of Cheever and Tracy. And then Hideki Noda. Carl Wendlinger, here's the move from Johansson. He's going to get up the inside of Alex Zanardi in the hairpin. And that will be the move for 13th. No worries at all then for the Swede. Stefan Johansson takes on the Italian Alessandro Zanardi to move up into 13th place. Desperately trying to get the Renault at least into the top 10, even if they can't get into the Grand Prix. This man is currently sat in 10th position. Roberto Moreno. Perry McCarthy's got ahead of him up into 9th place, and he is desperately trying to chase down Eric Bernard in the Modena Lamborghini. And I think it's going to be out of time for McCarthy. I think 9th position is all he can get from this one. Certainly one of the drivers of the race, though, to fight back after that difficulty earlier on. He's really made good work of his recovery drive. Down to the braking zone, though, comes the Honda. That's going to be Naoki Hattori in 3rd position, who's got Eddie Cheever behind him. Cheever's in danger of losing ground to Tracy if he's not careful. So Tracy in the Lamborghini could actually put himself further up here, and it will be a very neat and tidy opportunity for him if the Canadian can get through. But it's certainly looking pretty good at the moment for both Eurobrunn and Honda. Honda have their cars in 2nd and 3rd. There's Fernandez, currently chasing down one of the Fonmetals. I think that was Ratzenberger after his earlier throttle problem that brought him into the pits. As we continue riding on the top end of the course here with Stefan Johansson in the Renault, chasing down Tommy Byrne in the Zach Speed on the back straight. really interesting to see how it all continues. Down to the braking zone, hairpin, right turn. 7 laps remaining in this one. Fernandez looking good, and there's Naoki Hattori in the Sega Honda. I'm really concerned for Chiva here. He is losing time hand over fist, as Ricard Rydell in the Real is desperately trying to keep Pierluigi Martini's Minardi behind him. Ricard Rydell did a fabulous job in the lower categories. Got himself a drive with Real, looking very neat and tidy for this one. A lot of conversation about where he's going to be in 1992, whether he'll even be in Grand Prix racing. Apparently he has looked at both IndyCar and the Sports Car World Championship for next season. Everybody's got to keep their eyes on the prize. There will be some drivers, of course, that will have reserve and test driver roles in Grand Prix racing that will also have a sports car or an IndyCar program or even a Formula 2 program if the drivers are young enough. There is a rule being doubly enforced next season that in Formula 2 the drivers on the grid will all be under the age of 25 to encourage young talent onto the starting grid. Adrian Fernandez pushing Ratzenberger, so he's trying to close up on the Fontmetal. He's not racing him for position, of course. He's got 6 laps to go out in the lead, but he's got almost 15 seconds on Aguri Suzuki, and his pace has sort of leveled out here. He doesn't need to push too hard. So the key element now for Fernandez is just to keep it nice and tidy. Doesn't have to work too hard. So Fernandez, Suzuki, Hattori, and the big move on the inside. That is the Jordan making its way back into procedure. That's Carl Wendlinger, now in 7th position, of course. Oh no, sorry, that's Wallace, isn't it? That's Wallace, his teammate. So Andy Wallace has come through into 15th position. A long fight back in this race for Andy Wallace after his earlier problems, don't forget. So he has managed to come back with full determination and full gusto. Good to see that he is making steady progress up through the field once again. On to the back straight. Looking good for Naoki Hattori, chasing down Aguri Suzuki. As the rest of the runners, 3 retirements so far. Jean-Marc Gounod for Reynard Renault, Emanuele Pirro in the Dallara, and Martin Donnelly in the Fontmetal. So there is the Honda Aguri Suzuki. Just keeping it nice and tidy in 2nd position. 6 laps remaining for him and the Honda team to get themselves into the Grand Prix yet again. But Paul Tracy is really putting the Eurobrun team under some pressure here. Tracy wanting to put the Modena Lamborghini in front. With Fernandez in front, they'll still qualify, of course. But the Modena Lamborghini team and Paul Tracy have got a point to prove here. It's the United States versus Canada. Eddie Cheever versus Paul Tracy. So this will get to be a fairly fascinating race battle, that is for sure. 5 laps remaining then for Fernandez out front as Hattori crosses the line. And he's currently about 9 seconds behind his teammate Aguri Suzuki. But still looking good, of course, the 2 Hondas to put through. And there goes Fernandez, finally having caught and got ahead of Roland Ratzenberger. So he is lapping traffic now. So Fernandez has got to be very careful as he works his way through this traffic on the last couple of laps. 5 laps remaining. But all it takes is one slip up, one trip over another car, and it will all suddenly go against him. So Aguri Suzuki, who almost got nerfed off the road completely by Hideki Noda during the pit stops. Oh, that's Comas in the Minardi getting out of the way and going slowly by the look of it. And Andrea De Cesaris in the Coloni is now going to try and gain ground. You can see that this Subaru technical partnership on the side of the car, obviously part of Coloni's new identity. Subaru really wants to take the team forward in the future. Apparently the aim is to call the team Subaru Coloni in the future. Oh, Noda's lost a place. So Hideki Noda's now lost a position to Carl Wendlinger. The Jordan team are suddenly starting to look like late bloomers as Carl Wendlinger has got ahead of Noda. Now that could help their position. They're in 6th position now. And they're only 9 seconds back from Paul Tracy in the Modena Lamborghini. There's 3 laps to go at the end of this current lap that Fernandez is on. And there's Noda, look, he's lost the ground to Wendlinger. So Wendlinger into P6. Jordan team so close to qualification. But with Hideki Noda out of the way, if anything happens to Paul Tracy up front, then Wendlinger is right there in the mix, ready to try and make it happen as Winkelhock has made his move into 15th position and got an overtake there. So still good battles everywhere you look and still drivers making overtaking moves. You never know what's going to happen in Grand Prix racing in the RRML era, so good to see how the battles continue to shape up. Down to the breakings over the hairpin comes Aguri Suzuki, second position for the Japanese driver in the Honda. Those Sega colours, it's a very garish looking car. A lot of people said when they brought this livery in a few races ago, it was actually very cunning because that nose is very camouflage-esque. A lot of the teams were slightly concerned they were hiding some subtle designs behind a camouflage livery on the front nose section. Ivan Capelli getting out of the way to allow Adrian Fernandez to lap him. And there's going to be an interesting challenge now for Fernandez as the battle in this midfield really tightens up. He's going to then start racing with some of the faster drivers in the field. Not quite into the top 15 yet, but certainly there or thereabouts, as there is Aguri Suzuki. He's going to be facing the traffic very soon indeed, but of course, will he actually hit the traffic before the end of the race? Because there's 3 laps to go, and I'm not sure that Fernandez is obviously in the traffic, but Suzuki I don't think is actually going to find the traffic in time, as Andy Wallace gets another decent overtaking opportunity and dives in on Tommy Byrne, gets into 13th place. The Jordan drivers may have both hit trouble in this race, but they are fighting back with pure determination. And it's great to see both drivers putting on a show. So they've been unlucky in this one. Fate has really dealt them a fairly poor hand, but they fought back with great determination and done a fantastic job to make up the ground that was lost earlier on. As again, Suzuki just trying to keep it nice and tidy at the moment. As Adrian Fernandez locks up. Gotta be so careful in this car. It's not easy to get these cars doing what they need to do, and Adrian Fernandez has obviously got a 14-second lead, but you don't need to push these cars too hard. You lock these tyres up, they start becoming 50 pence pieces, and then they become very difficult, especially on a circuit like Jerez, where you get a lot of load on tyres. We've been quite fortunate, but there were a lot of punctures, a lot of incidents during the practice and qualifying session for the sprint leading up to this, so they've got to be very careful that they don't get themselves into hot water. They've got to look after these tyres right the way to the end. 2 laps to go then as Fernandez crosses the line. And that's Eric Bernard trying to close up on Hideki Noda. You can just about see him when he comes through certain apexes. He goes through the right one. You might just be able to make out Hideki Noda in the distance. I just about thought I saw him. He's certainly there in the chicane. You can just about make it out. He's a little far back as another position made up by Andy Wallace in the Jordan. He goes up to 12th now, ahead of Stefan Johansson in the Reynard Renault. So excellent work then from Stefan Johansson. Good positions made and some good work. So it's all going well and a really good situation continuing to develop. Well, I'm not sure that there's going to be enough time for the Jordans really to make an impact. Fair play to Carl Wendlinger. He's got that gap to Eddie Cheever down to 7 seconds. So he's made massive progress. It's really good drive from Carl Wendlinger after the difficulties earlier, but he's just going to run out of time, I think, to make any impact, but certainly on pure 1-lap pace. I think the Jordans had enough to qualify, but unfortunately fate dealt them a cruel blow. Here comes Adrian Fernandez, though. The Mexican driver will come off the final turn and go into the final lap. So it's going to be a really exciting run then for the Eurobrun team. They've got plenty to get excited about. There's Naoki Hattori in the Honda, running well in 3rd position. Aguri Suzuki still doing good in 2nd place. As the colony of Andrea De Cesaris is still making good overtaking moves in the closing stages of this race, as is the way it should be going. Excellent stuff so far. And a really neat race battle as things continue on. But Aguri Suzuki still having a great race of it. 1 lap to go then for Adrian Fernandez as he brings the Eurobrun home in the final corners of this race. Eurobrun will make it through, even though Eddie Cheever has now lost ground to Paul Tracy. They will still have their 5 cars in the top 5 positions as they continue on strong. Adrian Fernandez coming through the final sections of the car. He's slowing down. Fernandez has got a puncture. Fernandez with a puncture on the left front. And Fernandez is desperately trying to limit him. He can't make it. Fernandez, the race leader, is out. I cannot believe it. Fernandez is out of this race, and that is absolute hammer blow for Eurobrun. Now, they'll still qualify, of course, because Cheever is going to drop to 4th position out of all of this, but it's handed the Honda team a dominant 1-2. So a goody Suzuki in front of Naoki Hattori. And they're going to be 1-2 to the flag. Absolutely unbelievable how it's changed hands. So Suzuki in front of Hattori. They're going to be 1-2 to the line. Magnificent luck for the Honda team as a goody Suzuki comes through, takes the checkered flag, and it's a 1-2 victory for Honda. So a goody Suzuki wins from Naoki Hattori. What drama. Absolutely incredible that it's gone this way right at the bitter end. And then Paul Tracy will come through in the Modena Lamborghini to get the team in second position of the teams. And Eddie Cheever is a lucky man because the Eurobron team scrapes through only a mere few seconds in front of Carl Wendlinger, who got that gap down to 6.5 seconds at the end there. And there's still some overtaking moves down the order. But what a dramatic turn of events as Adrian Fernandez, a sure victory for the Mexican, is washed away by a puncture. Well, Honda 1 and 2 then. So a goody Suzuki and Naoki Hattori first and second place, with Paul Tracy in third position for the Modena Lamborghini team, and the third team that qualifies is Eurobron, although they were denied a certain victory by a last-minute puncture. Well, very dramatic scenes here, very dramatic turn of events, and that just shows you how tricky it's been for all of the contenders in this one. They've really had a very tough race of it, and so it is victory in magnificent fashion then for the Honda team. They get a 1-2 despite having not led a single lap of the race prior to this, other than the pit stop phase. A goody Suzuki crosses the line first after inheriting the lead on the very last lap of the qualifying sprint for the Spanish Grand Prix 1991. Very dramatic stuff there. Very dramatic scenes. It's 1-2 for Honda. Modena Lamborghini's Paul Tracy comes through for third. Eddie Cheever, fourth in the Eurobron. They make it. Carl Wendlinger, best of the rest for Jordan, ahead of Hideki Noda in the AGS. Then Bernard's Modena, McCarthy's AGS, the Coloni of Roberto Moreno ahead of Larini, Wallace, Johansson, Byrne and Winkelhock. And then Zanardi, McNish, Martini and Ratzenberger from the Jerez, Capelli, Rydell and Comas. Fernandez, Gounod, Pirro and Donnelly do not see the checkered flag. Very dramatic scenes here indeed. Fastest lap of the race goes to Adrian Fernandez, but that is scant consolation after a hammer blow of a wasted opportunity. So now we go into the Spanish Grand Prix for 1991, a very competitive race battle, and with the championship starting to heat up, things are going to get very interesting from here on out as we try to figure out who's going to get the job done. Will it be a Ferrari, a McLaren, or a Williams up at the top end? The Porsche Williams, very competitive in qualifying yet again for Ayrton Senna. And his teammate once again will be Thierry Boutsen, who has come back after serving his suspension. And they are front row of the grid lockout. It is a Porsche Williams lockout for Senna and Boutsen. Schumacher and Mansell in the Ferraris occupying the second row of the grid. It'll be a fierce race between them. Gerhard Berger in the McLaren and Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Tyrrell, ahead of Alessandro Nannini's McLaren and Rubens Barrichello, the youngster, looking very strong in that Tyrrell. Mika Hakkinen in the Brabham and Michele Alboreto in the Lotus, from Eddie Irvine's Ligier and Gianni Morbidelli in the Lola. Then Martin Brundle and Ari Leyendijk in the Arrows. Mika Salo makes his debut for Ligier. Paul Warwick replaces Derek at Lotus. Then Stefano Modena and a goody Suzuki in the Honda. Mark Blundell is alongside Eric Bernard. And then behind them it'll be Eddie Cheever and Paul Tracy, Naoki Hattori and Manuel Reuter really struggling in that Brabham, likely to be his last race for the team. And then at the back of the grid it is Adrian Fernandez and the second of the Arrows cars, driven by the Italian Luca Badua. So the competitors gearing up ready for the start then. 69 laps and the Spanish Grand Prix is set to be a really exciting duel. Let's see how it all plays out. Senna, Boutsen, Schumacher, Mansell. Lights are on. They will go out and we will be racing. Let's race at Jerez. And it's a perfect start for Thierry Boutsen. He launches away on his comeback to get into the lead of the race in front of his teammate Senna. Berger's on a charge to the first corner and he's beaten both the Ferraris off the line. So we're on board with Paul Warwick, substituting for his brother Derek. And a really exciting race battle as they charge their way through to the first couple of corners. But so far so good for the Williams pair. And the Porsche Williams duo in first and second, Berger third, then Schumacher, Mansell, Nannini and Frentzen in the Tyrrell. As everybody works their way through on this opening couple of laps of the race, and Thierry Boutsen already under pressure from his teammate. Senna is on the charge. Will he make the bid into the hairpin? I tell you what, Irvine's on the march though in the Ligier. So the Ligier is going to get through and nearly takes on Frentzen in the same breath. So Eddie Irvine gets through in the Ligier ahead of Mika Häkkinen's Brabham, the reigning world champion. The Brabham team really struggling in 1991 compared to last year. And look at these two, the Porsche-Williams duo, Boutsen and Senna, marching away into the distance already. Berger is almost holding up the Ferraris. So Thierry Boutsen just holding the lead at the moment. Senna clearly very racy off the line, but not as quick out of the blocks as Thierry Boutsen. He really wants to push for it and make this charge forward. So it's a really good charge forward as the drivers continue to make steady progress. Out of the final turn, and surely Senna's going to make this move into turn one. He's not quite close enough to Thierry Boutsen, actually. He's made a bit of a mistake in the final sector, so Senna still hustling his teammate Thierry Boutsen, but he doesn't have what it takes yet to get past him. So it'll take some time to make this overtaking move. So Boutsen and Senna, the two Porsche Williams cars. There's Eric Bernard, 18th position. Still having a very interesting time of things in that Modena Lamborghini. We saw them in the sprint race doing a fair job, and now here they are racing wheel to wheel with the top 10 cars. The top 10 brigade, this fabulous new qualifying system that was introduced at the beginning of last year to the Grand Prix World Championship. Really exciting to see how it's all started to meld in. The drivers and teams really like it because they get a race before the main event. The fans love it. So Boutsen in front of Senna. Senna's still hunting down the move. He's in no rush at the moment. Schumacher's got ahead of Berger, by the way, as well. So Schumacher now into third place for Ferrari. So Schumacher has got the move done on Gerhard Berger. There's Rubens Barrichello in the Tyrrell. A real superstar in the making, this young Brazilian. The Tyrrell team saw his testing times and thought they'd better promote the teenager into a race seat before anybody else got their hands on him. And he really is a bit of a superstar competitor now. Everybody is pretty... Oh, that's Marc Blundell. So that's the Benetton out of contention. Marc Blundell retiring the Benetton Porsche. So it's quite clear that the Porsche engine is doing better in the Williams than it is in the Benetton at the moment. And certainly Marc Blundell finding out the hard way that you don't always get things your own way. And certainly in the race here, just wondering to see if there was a replay of something. I think the marshals actually struggled to get him out of the grass verge there and actually rubbed him into the wall a little bit too ferociously. But fortunately, Marc Blundell is okay. He's out of the car. We're on board with Senna. Let's listen in. Good work so far over the top of the crest as he charges his way down towards the hairpin. Senna having a great race of it at the moment. Fernandez chasing down the arrows. I think that was Luca Badua who's just in front of him there. So Luca Badua trying to close up. And that's another move from a Ligier. That's young Mika Salo, the Finnish driver, making his debut for the Ligier team, replacing the Italian Riccardo Patrese, who has been, in quote, rested by the Ligier team. So Mika Salo, they're going to assess him ready for 1992. He was one of the only reserves in the field. There is Mika Salo, one of the only reserve drivers in the field who hadn't turned a wheel in a Grand Prix this year. So Ligier decided to give him a chance for the Spanish Grand Prix just to see what he could do. So Mika Salo definitely under some pressure to perform here as he tries to chase down Martin Brundle in the Benetton. That's a team that's really struggled, the Benetton team, in the second half of the year. Back on board with Thierry Boutsen. What a return to the Porsche Williams team. Obviously he was substituted mid-season by the young Brazilian driver Gil de Ferran, and he did a fair job. But obviously now that Thierry Boutsen's suspension is over, team principal Scott Woodward was very clear. Put him back in the car. Let's get some points in for the Constructors' Championship. So there is a very hard-charging race battle brewing for the young Italian Alessandro Nannini, winner of the Italian Grand Prix, of course, on home soil at Monza. But the McLaren in Alessandro Nannini's hands, that both the McLarens are struggling. That's Frentzen making the bid on Berger, and Frentzen gets ahead of Berger, so the McLaren's really off pace at the moment. As Frentzen gets the move in the Tyrrell, that puts him into 5th place with only the 2 Porsche Williams cars and the 2 Ferraris in front of the German. Lots of good shuffling of the deck down into that hairpin. So some choice overtaking moves. That looks like Paul Tracy, I should say, getting closer to the Brabham up the road. And the Brabham up the road is Manuel Reuter. There is young Michael Schumacher, Ferrari's superstar prodigy, who is still, don't forget, in contention to be world champion this year. As we go back to have a look at Martin Brundle in the Benetton, and now to Guru Suzuki, and he goes onto the gravel. Slams his foot on the brake right in front of the Lola. So that's a very frustrated Stefano Modena, who is definitely not finding the same sort of pace out of the Lola as his teammate Gianni Morbidelli is. So Gianni Morbidelli, who's really stepped up to the plate for Lola in the last couple of races. Just one place off the championship points. It's the top 10 that score points in the Grand Prix World Championship these days, of course. And look at Schumacher. He's really started to find his feet now that he's got rid of Berger. And he's pulled clear of his teammate Mansell, but he's chasing down the Williams pair. So these Porsche Williamses have got to get on with it. And there's the call from team principal Scott Woodward. Senna makes the move on the inside of Boutsen and gets in front. So Ayrton Senna will now have Thierry Boutsen surely to look after him. 15 points going the way of Ayrton Senna if he can hold the lead in this one. And in the fight for the Drivers' Championship, 15 points would be so valuable for Senna. He's had so many wins taken off him through mechanical problems. So he could really do with putting a win or two on the board. There's Barrichello, and he gets the move on Nannini. Brilliant work from this young teenage charge. Barrichello, a real talent. The Manuel Reuter in the Brabham, really struggling to get up to speed in this car. He's been working his graft in the world of sports car racing recently, but for some reason he just doesn't seem to be gelling with this Brabham at all. Tries to make his move on the inside and he loses ground there to the Modena Lamborghini. When you're in a Brabham, the car that won the championship last year with Mika Häkkinen, and you're struggling to stay in front of the cars that pre-qualified, that's a big problem as Senna locks up. Senna locks up in front of Boutsen. You've got to be so careful that you don't push the tyres too hard. So Senna making a bit, but that's right. If you look in the background, that's how close Schumacher's got to them now. So Schumacher is still putting these Porsche Williams cars under pressure. Down the back straight and down to the hairpin. Boutsen is just playing rear guardsman for Ayrton Senna at the moment as we go back on board with Manuel Reuter. This fabulous camera position on top of the airbox. He's chasing down the cars in front. As it looks as though Barrichello's now made another overtaking move, this time on Eddie Irvine in the Ligier. So Barrichello is turning into a bit of a superstar out there on the course. We've got a few of those now in Grand Prix racing, of course. But Senna, Boutsen, Schumacher, Mansell, Frentzen, Berger and Barrichello as we go on board with Luca Badua in the Arrows. Luca Badua trying to chase down Manuel Reuter. These are two drivers who are very much under some scrutiny at the moment. Reserve and test drivers for their respective teams, Brabham and Arrows. And, well, it looks as though they could well have some pressure on them as they begin to move forward. Senna, Boutsen, Schumacher, Mansell. All contenders for the Drivers' Championship this year, except for Thierry Boutsen. He just unfortunately missed too many races to still be in contention. But this is looking like a three-way fight for the title. With Alessandro Nannini still in that mix, of course, after his victory at Monza. So the McLaren driver, Nannini, this is a difficult race and a very difficult time of the season to be languishing back in P9 when you've got Senna, Schumacher and Mansell all in the top four. Look how close Schumacher's got to them. Really chipping away as Eddie Cheever comes into the pit lane. So problems then for the Eurobrun. Eddie Cheever struggling to make his impact. And that's Paul Tracy in trouble. So the Modena Lamborghini, puffs of smoke billowing out of the back of the car. And it's all over for Paul Tracy. He's out of it. The Canadian retires. And that's no points on the board then for the Canadian, as the marshal gets him well out of harm's way. And the recovery crew escort the Modena Lamborghini of Paul Tracy out of this race. Now, Senna still leads Boutsen. Look at Schumacher, though, right in behind the Belgian. So Michael Schumacher wants to win this race and wants to win this championship. Gianni Morbidelli hovering around behind Alessandro Nannini. That's not going to be comfortable viewing for the McLaren team, Principal Dave Goddard. He's got Gianni Morbidelli in the Lola, all over the back of him. Tom Cairns will be on that pit wall, grinning from ear to ear that Morbidelli, who did not start the season, don't forget, with the Lola team, but he's been promoted up into a race team seat. This is definitely good work from young Gianni Morbidelli, who's clearly been learning a lot from being a Ferrari test driver back in the day. So that skill and that ability has definitely given Gianni Morbidelli something to play with. There's Eddie Irvine running in front of Nannini and Morbidelli. And we've got Rubens Barrichello now putting Gerhard Berger in the McLaren under some pressure. There's the other McLaren of Nannini struggling to hold off Morbidelli and Häkkinen. On board with Schumacher. Now he's made a mistake somewhere. Schumacher, no, he's got a problem. Schumacher's slowing. Mansell gets in front. Schumacher's going to drop out of the race before we've even reached lap 10. Big problems for Schumacher. And that's the Ferrari charge very much severely taking a hammer blow. So the Williams team under much less pressure now with Schumacher dropping back. Mansell into third, Schumacher down to fourth place, but how much time is he going to lose? Here's Frentzen. Now, what's the issue? Has Schumacher got a problem? Has he got a mechanical issue that's going to put him out? Yeah, there it is. The engine blows. Oh, Michael Schumacher and the Ferrari team. They've had a very strong middle of the season, but the Ferrari charge goes up in smoke for Schumacher. They've still got Mansell in the race, of course. But that was a big chance for Schumacher to pull into the fight and put Senna under pressure. And the Ferrari goes pop. So it's game over for Michael Schumacher and the Ferrari team. There is Schumacher pulling off at turn 1. And it's game over. It's a water leak, in fact, is the official reason. But it doesn't matter. Michael Schumacher out of the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix. And the Ferrari charge is very much cemented in difficult situations then. It's up to Nigel Mansell to take the fight to the Porsche Williams duo. Let's not forget that both Mansell and Schumacher have signed on the dotted line to keep their futures favourable at Ferrari next year. They love working together, they love pushing each other. Mansell and Schumacher very much the Ferrari future. For how many more years though, because Mansell is still searching for that elusive first World Championship title. Badua on the inside of Manuel Reuter. And the Arrows gets through. So a nice bit of work there from the Arrows BMW. As Manuel Reuter in the Adidas Arrows gets in front. Senna. Hairpin. Back on the power and down the main straight as Naoki Hattori in the Honda is desperately trying to chase after the Eurobrun. It's just like it was in the qualifying sprint. So all going well indeed then as the drivers run forward. And that is Adrian Fernandez, who will still be seething from losing the qualifying sprint race earlier on to a puncture on the last lap. But it's all going beautifully well for the man up front, Ayrton Senna, who's got the lead in the Porsche Williams. The big pressure from Michael Schumacher in the early stages now gone as the German has retired from the race. We watch Stefano Modena, who's all the way down in about 17th position or so. His teammate, by comparison, Gianni Morbidelli in the other Lola, is all the way up in 8th place, ahead of Nannini's McLaren, ahead of Häkkinen's Brabham. So Morbidelli is having a great race in the Lola. There's Alboreto in the Lotus. Oh, and he's gone off! He's gone off the road! Alboreto losing the car, spins in front of the entire field. That is a terrifying place to lose the car. Is everybody going to be able to avoid him? He just dropped it through the right-hander. Big mistake then for Alboreto as everybody tries their best to get out of the way. It's on board with Hattori. It's a frightening moment down the back straight. Alboreto manages to get the car moving again. But that is the man who took a victory earlier this season, took 2 victories earlier this season, of course. And now he's going to be limping back to the pits with a broken front nose cone. Big embarrassment for Michele Alboreto and for the Lotus team in general. They really need a bit of a superstar in that team. They've got Derek Warwick and Michele Alboreto. And team principal Ryan Ferris must surely be thinking we need a galvanizer, we need a team leader to really step up the attack and push further forward. As Luca Badua now hunting down behind Manuel Reuter. So let's see how it continues. Reuter versus Badua. These two have been racing each other all through the race so far. For the first 10 laps they've been glued to each other, but also trying not to get caught by the Eurobrun and the Honda behind them. I think that's Aguri Suzuki in front of them, isn't it? Yes, it is. So Aguri Suzuki in front of both of those cars as we go back on board with Badua and Reuter. Our race director clearly likes this battle. So Alboreto limps back to the pits with the broken front nose cone. Bit of disappointment for the Italian, but there's still some good racing to come. And it's all going to come down to how much pressure Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari can place on the Porsche Williams duo of Senna and Boutsen. Frentzen in the Tyrrell going well in P4, and his teammate Barrichello ahead of Berger. Oh, that's Frentzen! Frenzen's pushed it! He's broken the front wing! Frentzen overshoots in the chicane. He's broken the front nose cone. So that's Frentzen out of P4. The Red Bull Tyrrell is going to come straight into the pits. Yes, it does. And that's going to be his teammate, Rubens Barrichello, that inherits the position. Big mistake from Heinz-Harald Frentzen. So he'll come down pit road. The team are there ready for him as a result of the mistake that Frentzen made. And that is such an embarrassing moment for Heinz-Harald Frentzen, chasing down Nigel Mansell, and he gets it wrong, and he will drop right down the order. 9 seconds in pit road, and well, Frentzen's got a hard race in front of him. There's Martin Brundle in the Benetton, almost overshoots at turn 1 as he chases down Arie Luyendyk in the leading Arrows. It's a very different team to what we started the season with at the Arrows team, of course. Nelson Piquet was in that team mid-season before he started hurling abuse at the team and then decided to walk out on the team. There's rumours going around that Piquet is going to be in sports car racing next year, or even IndyCar. Thierry Boutsen in front of Nigel Mansell, and Boutsen with so much pressure. Don't forget, he's missed the last few races due to a suspension mid-season. So he's now got the chance to fight back for the Porsche Williams team. Alboreto locking up. He doesn't want another off the road. He's already dropped it once. He certainly can't afford to do it a second time. Pushing hard up towards the first corner. And there's a pit stop being prepared. It's Mansell. So Mansell comes in on lap 12. What's happened to Mansell? So both the Ferraris having some trouble then. Mansell coming in very early indeed. There's nothing about that pit stop that will be scheduled. So Mansell drops back down the order with a mechanical issue, as Suzuki gets a very cheap overtake there on the Modena Lamborghini. So Mansell in the pits, and he will rejoin down the order. So a mechanical problem for Mansell as well. So Ferrari have hit trouble early, and Porsche Williams must be absolutely delighted. Their two cars, first and second, and into the pits comes the Modena Lamborghini that's clearly in trouble. So lots of shuffling of lots of decks here. So into the pits has come Mansell. Into the pits as well has come the Modena Lamborghini of Eric Bernard. And that's Frentzen with an engine blow. Oh, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen was destined not to finish this race anyway. But that's a big disaster for the Red Bull Tyrrell. And there's another car smoking as it passes. Everything's kicking off here at Jerez. It's the Eurobrun. It's Adrian Fernandez. Yet more bad luck for the Mexican. Taken out of the earlier sprint qualifying race with a puncture. And now Fernandez is going to have an engine problem that will take him out of this race in the Spanish Grand Prix itself. No luck at all for the Mexican. He doesn't make the finish of either the qualifying sprint or the Grand Prix. And Fernandez is on borrowed time here, really, as we join Rubens Barrichello on board. The teenager in third position. If anything happens to the Porsche Williams duo up front, then Rubens Barrichello could become the youngest Grand Prix winner in history. Don't forget, he's already had a podium this year. Second position earlier in the year for Rubens Barrichello. So it's not like he hasn't got the ability to do it. He's already proven that he's got some talent. So let's see what this fabulous young Brazilian can do. There's the other Brazilian, Ayrton Senna. The Sorcerer is up front. The Apprentice is in third position. So Senna ahead of Boutsen. And the Williams pair first and second. Oh, Fernandez, the car's actually caught fire as he finally pulls off on the final bend. But I don't think the rest of the field will be particularly kind to the fact that Fernandez stayed out for the entirety of that last lap, despite the fact that the car was smoking and billowing fumes and probably oil going down due to the engine failure. As Thierry Boutsen continues in second place, trying to make as much work of things as he possibly can. So now the race battle continues. Down to the hairpin. And Boutsen is 3 seconds back from Senna. They're 11 seconds ahead of the Tyrrell of Rubens Barrichello. Berger in fourth in the McLaren. Then Irvine's Ligier. There's Mansell's Ferrari back out onto the circuit again after his clear problem in the pits. He's getting going again. No issues with the car, really, but That's probably because they had to do a basic reset of the car when he came back into the pits. So Mansell now having to charge his way back into contention, and he's caught up with the arrows of Arie Luyendyk. So Arie Luyendyk is now the next man for our man Nige to try and take on. The Ferrari driver closing in. Senna leads Boutsen, Barrichello, Berger, Irvine, Morbidelli, Hakkinen in the Brabham, Nannini in the second McLaren, and then Luyendyk in the arrows in front of Mansell in the Ferrari. And then just outside the points, we've got Brundle's Benetton and Mika Salo's Ligier ahead of Paul Warwick, substituting for his older brother Derek in the Lotus team. And then Stefano Modena in front of Aguri Suzuki in the Honda. And Ayrton Senna not pushing harder than he needs to, is he? He's just keeping it nice and tidy. I think he's seen that the attrition rate is high, and he knows that the Porsche engine can be a little bit brittle at times, so he's not pushing harder than he needs to, especially now that the Ferrari charge has waned, with Schumacher out and Mansell having a technical difficulty coming into the pits and rejoining down in 10th. So the Porsche Williams drive is not going to be quite so stressful. Luyendyk, however, under all sorts of stress as Mansell really pushes him into the apexes of these corners, trying to force the error, trying to make the mistake happen for the Arrows driver. So let's see how it's going to progress. It's going to be an interesting charge forward for him. Mansell just can't make that gamble on the inside of the hairpin. He's just got to be calm and composed. On board with Barrichello. Full chat through the left-hander. Finds the apex nice and smoothly through the right hand. You've got to flirt with that white line on the exit. And then down that back straight. Find the 100-meter board. Bang on the brake pedal. Down through the gears. Very nice work so far from Rubens Barrichello. He seems a natural in this Tyrrell team. As there is Thierry Boutsen. Great return to form on his renaissance in the Williams team. A lot of discussion about who will be driving for Williams next year, but apparently Thierry Boutsen, the seat is safe was the last word. But then, as we've learned in Grand Prix racing recently, those race drives, they're just contracts, they're just pieces of paper with signatures on them. They can be rewritten, and they can even be torn up. Eddie Cheever through the right-hander. And now Chiatori loses the Honda. What a recovery, though, from the Japanese driver. It doesn't even look as though the car's damaged. So now Chiatori gets away with that. That's the get out of jail free card heading his way as Rubens Barrichello comes in. Now, looking at the lap times, that might be a scheduled stop for Barrichello. He comes in from third position on at the end of lap 16 he comes in. He's the first driver to pit, so I don't know whether he's doing a 3-stop strategy or whether that was a mechanical issue for Barrichello as well. But no, Nannini's coming to the pits as well, so anybody on a 3-stop strategy, this is the right time. As Mansell dives in on Luyendyk, and Mansell gets through. That's P7 for the Ferrari with the pit stops of Nannini and Barrichello. So the first scheduled pit stops are underway. Thierry Boutsen, 4 seconds to the deficit of Senna, but the Porsche Williams team just doing their normal drill. Keeping it nice and tidy for the moment. And there's Irvine making the bid for third position on Gerhard Berger. Eddie Irvine puts the Ligier with the Renault engine into third position. Now that's going to give Renault fans a really big sigh of relief because it's clear that the Renault engine does have potential. And Barrichello getting his move on the inside of young Mika Salo to get through on the inside and put himself back into the top 10. So Rubens Barrichello on fresh set of tyres now. What kind of impression can he make? If he keeps pushing, he might even give the Porsche Williams duo a hard time. There's Boutsen. And I've got a feeling the Porsche Williams pair are going a bit further into the race as Alboreto locks up in turn 2 in the Lotus. It's going to be a long Grand Prix for Michele Alboreto, that's for sure. He's currently in dead last. We've lost Fernandez, Frentzen, Michael Schumacher, Paul Tracy, and at the very start of the race, of course, we also lost Mark Blundell in the Benetton as Gianni Morbidelli brings the Lola in from P6. His consistency getting him right up at the sharp end. Good work from Morbidelli in this race. A real star. So there is Morbidelli in pit lane. We'll try and see where he ventures out. But this has been a very solid race indeed from the Lola driver. So Morbidelli rejoins. Is he going to get out of the pits in front of Aguri Suzuki in the Honda, I wonder? So there across the line will go Suzuki. And no, Morbidelli beats him out, so that's 13th for the MasterCard Lola. Here's Eddie Irvine in the Ligier. 3rd position, but then of course Mansell had his problems earlier on and Barrichello made a scheduled pit stop. So this is still Irvine in net P4, if you work it out on that regard. A few drivers taking a bit of a tactical gamble to go on a 3-stop strategy by the look of it. Barrichello and the Tyrrell team clearly think it's going to work out for them, and with only one car in the race now, thanks to the retirement of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, they may as well try it. Here's Boutsen, P2, as he goes across the line, and there's Nannini after his pit stop, taking on Manuel Reuter in the Brabham. Nice dive into the hairpin. Easy pickings for the Italian Grand Prix winner of 1991. And so he gets through into P16. Next target, Luca Badua in the Arrows. There's Irvine in the Ligier, trying to get away from Gerhard Berger. Mika Hakkinen, reigning world champion of course in that Brabham, as a novice driver in 1990, the first ever rookie world champion. But Mika Hakkinen struggling in the Brabham. All sorts of conversations regarding his services for next year, as up the inside goes Barrichello. Another big move, this time on Martin Brundle in the Benetton. So good racing from Rubens Barrichello. He is absolutely picking them off one by one. And that's before these drivers make their pit stop. It looks like the majority of the field are going to be on 2 stops rather than Barrichello and Nannini, who have decided to go for a 3-stop strategy. That will explain a little bit why Barrichello was so fast in the early phase. Doesn't explain why Alessandro Nannini was so slow, though, in the McLaren. If he's on a 3-stop strategy, you'd have expected Nannini to be fighting with Barrichello, but if he wasn't, he was about 9th position in the first phase of the race. There's been a lot of pressure on Nannini. He's basically being touted in the press as either a race victor or an absolute loser, was one of the quotes in Gazzetta dello Sport. So Nannini is kind of either the magic man or well off the boil, and there is Nannini getting the move there on Luca Badua to get into 15th position, past his countryman. Now he's going to take on the Japanese driver Aguri Suzuki in the Honda. And of course that is the Honda engine car that's behind him. So 2 Hondas, there is Nannini getting through. McLaren gets past Works Honda. Fascinated to see how long the Works Honda team will tolerate being beaten by their customer. Alboreto skates around the hairpin. Alboreto really struggling down at the back as Audi Leyendijk comes in for, again, a fairly early pit stop, it has to be said, in the Arrows. But if the 3-stop strategy is going to work out in their favour, then they're obviously committing to it and making good work of things at the moment. Lap 20 out of the 69-lap Spanish Grand Prix of 1991, and it's still all good for Porsche Williams. 1 and 2 at the moment for Ayrton Senna and Thierry Boutsen. Then it is Eddie Irvine in the Ligier, 3rd position in front of Gerhard Berger in the McLaren. Then it is Mika Hakkinen's Brabham in front of Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari, who's fought his way back up at P6 after a technical problem earlier on. They have obviously filled the car with fuel, so they're now going to have to try and convert that to at the very minimum, a podium strategy. Won't be easy for the Ferrari team to fight back with that. Barrichello 7th in the Tyrrell. He ran as high as 3rd earlier on. Martin Brundle in the Benetton. 9th is Mika Salo in the 2nd Ligier. And then Paul Warwick in the Lotus, doing a good job there in P10. As Badua gets his move on Aguri Suzuki. That will keep the Arrows BMW team happy. They've taken on the Honda Works team, and they've got in front. And Thierry Boutsen passes the stricken Tyrrell of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and Senna very close there as he nearly trips over Eddie Cheever in the Eurobrunn. As Mika Hakkinen comes into the pits in the Brabham, and so too does Eddie Irvine. So 2 men going into the pits together, as Modena and Morbidelli, just outside the points, will now go back into the points in their MasterCard Lolas. With Modena just in front of Morbidelli. Don't forget Morbidelli pitted, Modena did not. So it'll be an interesting sequence, and there goes Morbidelli out in front of Hakkinen again. So Gianni Morbidelli, the Italian, is becoming a bit of a star here, in front of the reigning world champion in the Brabham Ilmore. So Mika Hakkinen not able to do anything about Gianni Morbidelli for the moment. As we approach 1/3 distance in the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix. Senna 5 seconds ahead of this man, Thierry Boutsen, his Belgian teammate, rested after a suspension, replaced by the Brazilian Gil de Ferran, to make an all-Brazilian lineup at Porsche Williams for a while. Ayrton Senna was very pleased that Thierry Boutsen back in the team again to finish off the season. and of course strengthen the Porsche Williams team's bid to win the Constructors' Championship this year. Up in front of Badua, that's Nannini getting ahead of Leyendijk. So the two Arrows cars are now 14th and 15th. Arie Leyendijk, the Dutchman, and Luca Badua, the Italian, now 14th and 15th place. All sorts of discussions in the paddock, of course, about the longevity of the Arrows operation. Rumours that the Japanese F3000 team, or Formula 2 team, as it is now known, of course, Footwork may well be coming in to purchase what remains of the Arrows team's assets. Although there is rumours that Footwork may want to go at it themselves, as Senna goes round the outside of Alboreto to put a lap on him. Talk about bravery. Ayrton Senna just always seems to know where to place the car to get the most out of it. He'll try any trick in the book, even if it's a big risk. It's fascinating to see him make those gambles once again. There's Aguri Suzuki in the Honda. Now, we did say that we were going to talk you through the runners and riders for the 1991 season. I'm not quite sure where my head was on that one. I do apologise. The 1991 season, I think I was watching cricket earlier, that's why. So the competitors for the 1992 season, it'll be interesting to see how they all continue to progress. But there's some big discussion about next year, and obviously a few of the drivers have already been confirmed at their new teams for next season. Of course, as we always know, things can change on the turn of a dial in Grand Prix racing. Just because they've signed a contract doesn't mean that contract is going to be concrete. And you often get rumours of teams obviously changing hands, and different teams will get their opportunity, and it becomes very, very interesting as things continue to progress. We can talk a little bit now as the race is sort of settling down into a bit of a rhythm. Senna making the pit stop and rejoining behind Thierry Boutsen, by the way. So, scheduled pit stop for Porsche Williams. Senna goes first. Boutsen will be not far behind, I would reckon, as now Mansell is not far away from Berger. Barrichello is not far away from Mansell. So it's going to be a bit of a calm-natured race at the moment. So we already know that there's going to be some really interesting shuffles of the deck in 1992. Benetton confirmed that they have signed Mika Hakkinen for next season, alongside David Coulthard, the young Scottish driver who's been ripping up the Formula 3000 race circuit this year, looking set to become champion in 1991. And there's Eddie Irvine making the bid on the inside of Paul Warwick, and that's Modena. Stefano Modena spins the Lola off at turn 1. So Stefano Modena spins the MasterCard Lola clean off the race circuit. So a big moment there. And of course Thierry Boutsen, the man who has signed a deal with the Arrows Repco team, moving into next season's championship. He's going to be partnered by Arie Leyendijk. Belgian driver Thierry Boutsen tasked with putting the Arrows team back towards the front. And of course Thierry Boutsen is leading the Grand Prix here at the moment, so that seems like a very good signing for Arrows, as Stefano Modena sat in the gravel at turn 1, trying to figure out how he's going to get the car back out again. Big disaster then for Stefano Modena. Is that going to be game over as Paul Warwick brings the Lotus into the pits? There's Martin Brundle in the Benetton. He's not going to be in the team next year, nor is his teammate Mark Blundell. It'll be a complete fresh lineup at Benetton next year, as team principal Lucy Ball-Wood has decided to bring in Mika Hakkinen, the 1990 world champion, and David Coulthard, Scotland's next big Grand Prix hope. Of course, we know that there's going to be a Ford lineup next year in the shape of Aston Martin, and they've gone for an all-British lineup as well. It'll be Johnny Herbert and Damon Hill in that team for next season. There is Paul Warwick in the Lotus. We know that the Lotus team is going to have Mark Blundell and Al Unser Jr. at the wheel next year. They're going to bring in Al Unser Jr. from IndyCar, as Thierry Boutsen, next year's Arrows incumbent, comes into the pits from the lead. His teammate Ayrton Senna has already pitted, so let's see what the Williams team can do to turn around Boutsen. Quick stop from the crew. Looks like it's going to be a good one. 8.7, very good work indeed from Porsche Williams, as Mansell closes right up on Berger, and there is Ayrton Senna, who's got smoke coming out of the car. Senna comes to a front. Oh, there's flames! Flames out the back of the Porsche Williams! Ayrton Senna has only just taken back the lead of the Grand Prix, and he's going to be out of it! Another 15 points for Ayrton Senna! Gone! Well, they do say that this Porsche Williams is fast, but it is brittle. And yet again, Ayrton Senna's dreams of winning for Porsche Williams, this time in Spain, are up in smoke. Literally, there goes Thierry Boutsen past him to take the lead. All eyes will be on him now. There goes Berger, there goes Mansell, and Ayrton Senna parks the Williams. Big drama here at Jerez, as Senna is once again denied a race victory. And that will be very tough pills to swallow for Ayrton Senna, who's just re-signed, of course, for the Williams team next season, alongside his countryman Gilles de Ferran. Obviously decided to promote him after his suspension, a replacement of Thierry Boutsen, who was suspended. Gilles de Ferran will make it an all-Brazilian lineup next year. There's apparently going to be a much more Brazilian influence on the Porsche Williams car next year. But, well, got a feel for Ayrton Senna, who loses the race with an engine failure. Big disaster, big disaster. So Thierry Boutsen takes over the lead of the Spanish Grand Prix then. Gerhard Berger in the McLaren, who of course was rather hoping to keep his seat for next season, and has confirmed that he will be driving for the team again in 1992 alongside his teammate Alessandro Nannini. We know, of course, that Gerhard Berger will be staying. We know that the Ferrari team will be unchanged for next year as well, of course, because the Ferrari team is going to remain with its two drivers next year, after Nigel Mansell and Michael Schumacher both confirmed they're going to be staying. Mansell gets the move there on Berger. I just saw it out of the corner of my eye into the hairpin. Mansell gets ahead of Berger. There's Nannini, who will stay on with McLaren next season. So Mansell and Schumacher will stay on at Ferrari in 92. So will Berger and Nannini at McLaren. But there are going to be some interesting changes up and down the rest of the field. We know, of course, that the Red Bull Tyrrell team, with their new Repco engines, they're going to return Repco to the world of Grand Prix racing for the first time since the 60s. And the Repco engines will be captaining the team. So it's going to be really exciting to see what they can do. The team will retain its two drivers, Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Rubens Barrichello, for next season, as Thierry Boutsen sets the fastest lap of the race for the Porsche Williams team. He now needs to get on with this because Mansell is into second position, and that is bad news for Williams in terms of the Drivers' Championship. Senna looking very vulnerable now with him out of the race. Of course, Schumacher was out of the race earlier, so as far as the championship battle is concerned, it's pretty much stalemate between Senna and Schumacher, but Mansell can score big here, as we know. So there's a lot still riding on this. So while we're waiting for more interesting championship battles to continue, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other driver lineups that have been discussed and mooted for next year. The Brabham team are going to sign Martin Brundle and Riccardo Patrese for next year, as there's Barrichello making the bid on Berger. Barrichello into third position in the Tyrrell, ahead of the McLaren. Great drive from Rubens Barrichello. No wonder Sam Hall wanted his signature again for 92. Here's Gianni Morbidelli, another hot property for next season, no doubt. It's not confirmed yet where he's going to be driving in 1992. As rumours arrive that he's going to try and re-sign... Oh no, sorry, he has been confirmed. I apologise. At Minardi for next year, alongside Eric Comas, which kind of seems like a poor choice for him, but apparently Minardi want to make him their team captain. So Gianni Morbidelli, who's now finding life in the top 10 in a Lola, is going to be back in pre-qualifying next year in a Minardi, unless all of a sudden that deal falls apart, because we do know that contract negotiations and the Contract Recognitions Board can throw things up in the air. Things can change, as we know. So Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari, still pushing hard. Naoki Hattori doing... Oh, and Hattori's gone off again for the second time in the same place. This time he's really made a hash of it. And yet, somehow, that Honda is still strong enough that he's gone through the gravel, up in the air, and the nose cone isn't even broken. He waits for a gap in the traffic and gets back on again. Wow, fascinating stuff. As we continue to watch the progress of the competitors making good work of things. So now we're going to see if Nigel Mansell has what it takes to close up on Thierry Boutsen. So going back through the 92 runners and riders so far, Brabham have Martin Brundle and Riccardo Patrese, as we know. We already talked about Lotus. They're going to have Toyota engines for next season, getting a little bit of Japanese influence. And they're going to have Mark Blundell and Alonso Jr. at the team. They poached him from the world of IndyCar. He'll be making his debut next year. Eddie Irvine is going to stay on at Ligier, and he'll be joined by the new Frenchman Olivier Panis, who's done a very good job so far in Formula 2. Nigel Mansell around the far side of the Honda. Don't trip over it. Oh, that was close. And he manages to get clear. But look at Rubens Barrichello. He's putting Mansell under pressure. So the Tyrrell is the one that's giving Mansell the hurry up. In terms of the championship fight, this race is turning into a bit of an underdog contest. All the championship contenders are struggling. Schumacher out, Senna out, Berger down in 4th, Nannini down in 8th, and Mansell in 2nd under some pressure from Barrichello in the Tyrrell. Now, of course, there is another big team that's going to be making its move into Grand Prix racing full-time as the Esso Peugeot Talbot squad step up to the world of Grand Prix racing, and they are going to go full-time factory in 1992, as are Renault. You already know about Renault, of course, but be excited to see what the Peugeot team can do with Alain Prost and Jean Alesi confirmed and signed up for 1992. And apparently they're going to be dovetailing it with a sports car program as well. So they'll be doing select races of the Sports Car World Championship with Peugeot, which is going to be very exciting to see them do both Formula 1 and sports car racing next season. The footwork team, if all goes to plan and they do end up on the grid, they're going to take the experienced Satoru Nakajima into Grand Prix racing. They haven't told us what their engine manufacturer is going to be yet, but I imagine it will be some form of Japanese power unit. We know, of course, already that Jordan are going to be on the grid again next year with Penske in partnership and Chevrolet engines. It's going to be a bit of an American-Irish lineup for next season. Andy Wallace is staying on with the team, as is the American youngster Michael Andretti, son of Mario. So that'll be interesting to see what they can do in Grand Prix racing next year. The Von Metal team, which has been running Martin Donnelly and Roland Ratzenberger this year. Donnelly is retained, but Tom Christensen, the young Danish driver, is going to be stepping up into Grand Prix racing next year. We've heard about Modena Lamborghini several times. Well, Stefano Modena is going to join the team that also bears his family name alongside Eric Bernard. And the March team are going to be getting themselves back together in Grand Prix racing after their split with Honda. March will have Paul Warwick in the team, who's obviously substituting at Lotus at this time out, and Christian Fittipaldi will join the team. Minardi, we've already talked about, with Minardi having Maranello engines for next year. Eric Comas and Gianni Morbidelli. And then Tom Cairns and the Lola team, they will be back next year. It'll be an all-new look. The MasterCard colours will be gone, apparently, because they're doing a deal with another team, from what I gather. And they've signed up the young French driver Jean-Christophe Bouillon, but nobody else is currently being mooted in the team at this moment in time. Although Mika Salo has signed a testing contract based on what he's doing here in the Ligier. He may well get himself a better drive. Look at Barrichello hustling Mansell in the Ferrari. Rubens Barrichello in the Tyrrell, really starting to put some pressure on, and Gerhard Berger is just being left behind in the McLaren. Eric Bernard in the Modena Lamborghini, he'll be staying with them next season, of course, all being well. Over at Dallara, there's going to be a bit of a shuffle of the deck. Nicola Larini will be joined by the Mexican Adrian Fernandez. That deal was signed this weekend, apparently, so they clearly saw what he did in pre-qualifying and wanted to put him in the car. The only confirmation for Honda next season is that Naoki Hattori will be staying on. A goody Suzuki, though, he's got suspension problems. You can see the right front is askewed compared to everything else. Suzuki is out of the race. So a goody Suzuki storms from the car, not happy at all, and he's out of it. And obviously we also know the two other teams that are coming in. Venturi Larousse. Gerard Larousse is getting the team together with Marcus Johansson at the team principalship. With Mauricio Gugelmin and Pierre-Henri Raffanel joining the team. A bit of youth and experience there. And of course we know about the Virgin Renault Sport team, the factory team that's being captained by Lewis Bassendale. And they've currently signed Michele Alboreto and Yannick Dalmas for next season. So Alboreto, with all of his fantastic prowess and skill from the days of Tyrrell, Lotus and Ferrari, he will be an interesting one to lead the Renault charge in 1992. So still some interesting battles. Thierry Boutsen leading the way here, the man who'll join the Arrows team next year. with their Repco engines. I bet the Williams team will be wishing they signed him up now, because it's definitely looking like a very smooth run from Thierry Boutsen, and I'm sure the Porsche Williams team are just hoping he gets the victory across the line now, because not only will it be a great comeback, but it'll certainly help out Williams in the Constructors' Championship. They could really do with the points after Ayrton Senna had that miserable problem, and Mika Häkkinen nearly losing the Brabham into turn 1. Good recovery from the reigning world champion, who of course will move from the Brabham team to the Benetton team next year. So Mika Häkkinen joining Benetton Porsche. That'll be really exciting. Porsche still going to collaborate with Benetton next season. No change for the Apple Benetton squad. They're definitely going to have a good run. Häkkinen goes off again this time. This time it's a big off, and Gianni Morbidelli is just going to sweep past him. No problems at all for the Lola. I reckon Häkkinen's got a big problem with that Benetton, Brabham. Sorry, I'm tempting fate, because he's going to be in that Benetton next year. Of course, it's Martin Brundle at the wheel this year, but Häkkinen will join them next season. But I've got a sneaky suspicion that all is not well in that Brabham for Häkkinen. He's got real handling difficulties with the car, so it's all looking a little bit untidy for him at the present moment. Still they battle on. Here's Mansell in the Ferrari, and Barrichello makes his second pit stop. So the 3-stop strategy definitely working out, as Irvine now in 5th position, running around the fast side of the corner. Got to be careful. Oh, the Eurobrun nearly tripping over the Ligier. But Barrichello in for his second scheduled pit stop. Expect Alessandro Nannini to be in the next couple of laps as well. Of course, the McLaren driver will probably be on a similar strategy, but it tells you a lot, doesn't it? The McLaren just doesn't have the pace here at Jerez by comparison to the Tyrrells. Frentzen out of the race earlier on, of course. And, well, Barrichello rejoining in 5th position, well clear of Nannini, who's on a similar strategy. There's Audi Leyendijk in the arrows, trying to keep up with Mika Salo. Salo's doing a fair job now, as we approach half distance in this Spanish Grand Prix. And it's certainly looking very neat and tidy for Mika Salo, as still the pressure cooker rumbles on, as Paul Warwick hustles Arie Leyendijk for 11th position. Great run this from young Paul Warwick, the younger brother of Derek. And that's Morbidelli! Morbidelli! Engine blow in the Lola. Oh dear, his brilliant drive up in smoke. Who knows where Morbidelli could have ended up, where the Lola could have finished. But Morbidelli was having a fantastic drive up to that point. Bitter gall for Gianni Morbidelli. That was a really exciting drive for the Italian, and he was really showing his spades there. Making a fantastic run as Gerhard Berger comes into the pits. So Berger in the McLaren. Is he converting to a 3-stop strategy? Because that's Berger into the pit lane in the McLaren. Either that, or I'm trying to remember if he came in the first time. Surely he's already been in. So yeah, I think that might be a 2-stop strategy then, because he's come in before half distance. I'm fairly sure he'd already made a pit stop. Otherwise he'd been further up. So the McLaren team appear to be converting Gerhard Berger to a 3-stop strategy here. But the 3-stop strategy is not really making up for McLaren's power deficiency. Nannini's got ahead of him in P6, but Berger will still have another pit stop to go. There's no way he can run this car to the end of the race in its current form. So Thierry Boutsen going well in front of Mansell, Irvine, Barrichello and Häkkinen. But Thierry Boutsen has just got to keep ticking this over. Having a very smooth race at the moment. There's Eddie Irvine in the Ligier, still having a very smooth race. And looking good for some solid points here for the team that's going to tie up with Bugatti next season, the French manufacturer. Apparently they're going to be doing a lot of marketing for the new hypercar. Oh, I was going to talk about the new hypercar, the new Bugatti EV110 that's been touted. Eric Bernard very nearly dropped the Lamborghini off the race circuit. Down the main straight here at Jerez, looking for some points if the Lamborghini can make it there. No longer a qualifying race, of course. This is all for championship points. Any cars in the top 10 will score championship points. Thierry Boutsen leads Nigel Mansell by 18 seconds as the Ferrari is just trying to bring this car home in the top 3, and it'll give Mansell a huge boost in the championship fight. And it looks like Il Leone, as he is known to the Tifosi, is finally looking like a potential world championship title could be on the cards for him. Looks very neat and tidy in second place. As there's Irvine in the Ligier, Third position in front of Barrichello, who of course is on a 3-stop strategy. So Barrichello can start to make up that ground again to Irvine. He's clear of Hakkinen in the Brabham and Nannini in the McLaren. But Gerhard Berger down to 7th after his most recent pit stop. Brundle, Sarlo and Paul Warwick. There's Eddie Cheever in the Eurobrunn Ford, which of course is going to become the Aston Martin Ford team next year. Very excited to see what Aston Martin bring to the table with their new car for next season. Doing the deal with Ford, so it'll be the Ford Motor Company, but with Aston Martin as their current badge holders. And Mansell pits from P2. So Thierry Boutsen is left with a half-minute lead over Eddie Irvine then in the chase for second position. So Thierry Boutsen just needs to keep this car ticking over, but we've already lost one of the Porsche Williams cars, so we could lose a second one, although it was a water leak for Senna. So I don't think it's necessary that we're going to see an engine failure for this car. It's certainly looking pretty neat and tidy at the moment. Rubens Barrichello gets out in front of Mansell. So Mansell rejoins right in behind, and Nannini comes in. I did say that was going to be a 3-stop strategy for the McLaren pair. Brundle in the Benetton comes in as Irvine laps one of the Hondas. It looks like Hattori, who drops it at the same corner again, but manages to recover. I wonder if the Honda team will be feeling particularly confident with Naoki Hattori's services. It's the 3rd time in this race he's dropped it at the same corner on the circuit. If at first you don't succeed, try again, it seems. As Naoki Hattori does not seem to be learning from his mistakes at the moment. As Michele Alboreto brings the Lotus in, Thierry Boutsen laps the remaining laps the remaining Lola, which is ironic because Stefano Modena is the driver, and of course he's joining Modena for next season. So it'll be Modena at Modena. Eddie Cheever, oh, that's why he was a little offline, because Rubens Barrichello was passing him. He puts a lap on the Eurobrunn, and there goes Nigel Mansell storming through on the inside line. Perfect eyewitness account from Eddie Cheever. Watch 2 of the hard charges in this race, both of whom are going for Grand Prix victory here at Jerez, making light work of the opponents. Eddie Irvine comes in P2, in the Ligier, in 2nd position. So this is going to be a great chance for Irvine to score points if he can just keep it together. But Barrichello is now through to 2nd in the Tyrrell. Mansell 3rd for Ferrari. Hakkinen 4th for Brabham. Berger is now 5th. And that's Alessandro Nannini. Oh, and he's gone clean off the road and broken the front nose. Well, oh dear, Alessandro Nannini not endearing himself to the McLaren team. He's only just made his 2nd pit stop, don't forget. So now he's got to come in again and repair the front nose. Well, this is what we were talking about earlier on about Alessandro Nannini. He's the kind of driver who is very much win it or bin it. On this particular occasion, it's very much bin it for the Italian. On board with Mansell in the Ferrari. Get used to this sight because Tyrrell really have stepped up their attack. But Mansell chasing down the Tyrrell. Ferrari versus Tyrrell. Haven't seen that particularly regularly since the 70s, but since this new injection of funding from this new energy drink called Red Bull from Austria, and the Honda engines, of course, it's all very exciting. But of course, from next year, they have an unchanged driver lineup. It'll still be Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Rubens Barrichello in the Tyrrells, but they've got a new engine for next year, as Repco, all the way from Australia, are making their return to the world of Grand Prix racing in a very unique contract with Tyrrell, although they are supplying customer engines to Arrows for next year as well. So with 2 different teams with Repco engines, it'll be interesting to see what they can do. They've been doing a lot of interesting projects down under, and this is their first foray back into Grand Prix racing since the late 60s, early 70s. So it'll be fascinating to see whether the Repco engine that has been painstakingly built is going to be any good when they get into Grand Prix racing. It'll be fascinating to see what they can be like. Down the back straight. Up to the braking zone for the hairpin. Mansell closing in on Barrichello. The Ferrari power compared to the Honda engine in that Tyrrell. Very strong, and that's a very embarrassing sight for Benetton as through goes Thierry Boutsen to lap Martin Brundle in 10th position. What a comeback for the Belgian Thierry Boutsen. The Porsche Williams going strong in the lead of the race, 40 seconds clear of Barrichello and Mansell. Of course, Boutsen has yet to make his second pit stop, but I think he's on a 2-stop strategy rather than a 3-stop. So here is Barrichello trying desperately not to trip over the Honda, because if he trips over it, Mansell's going to get through into second place, but Mansell could be going for the move anyway. And into the pits comes the Honda. Well, that's good timing. Eddie Irvine, a little bit of an error there in the Ligier. He's just in front of his teammate Mika Salo. The team doing a good job as Naoki Hattori makes his way into the pits to get out of the way of Barrichello and Mansell. But Tyrrell versus Ferrari fighting over second position. Can Mansell get back on terms with Rubens Barrichello? As Boutsen leads, Barrichello second, Mansell third, Hakkinen fourth. Here's Mansell all over the back of the Tyrrell. They storm through the left-hander. And this is going to be the best shot Mansell's had for a while to take on Rubens Barrichello through the right. Careful, keep it nice and tidy. Both drivers very close, but Mansell's right on the gearbox of the Tyrrell, and surely he's going to make the dive. He does indeed. He looks for the move on the inside line, and Nigel Mansell into second place in the Ferrari. Beautiful. No response from Barrichello in the Tyrrell. And Mansell gets the job done. Boutsen into the lead of the race, as we know. 42 seconds nearly clear of Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari, as there is Mika Salo, the young Finn, in the Ligier, making his Grand Prix debut. And he's right up there in the top 10. Good points on the board for Salo. Currently at the moment, in front of the leading Benetton, in front of the McLaren of Alessandro Nannini. So a very solid effort, as into the pits comes Manuel Reuter in the second of the Brabhams. This is a fair debut for young Mika Salo. Finn doing a great job. And that's Irvine going off. Irvine's gone off and damaged the car. So big problems then for Irvine. Look at it. The front wing is broken. So one Ligier is now going to make its way limping back to the pits in the hope that it can get a repair quickly. But the other one is going to be Mika Salo, and he's going to be promoted to P6 in front of Paul Warwick. So a race full of young'uns, as Salo's going to be promoted to P6, Paul Warwick's going to be promoted to P7, and that's his teammate, Michele Alboreto, going off again. So Alboreto, who dropped all the way to the back of the field, is now 12th. So big mistake from Alboreto, but he gets going again in the Lotus. 3 races for him left of the season after this one before he joins the Renault team as their lead driver. So that'll be a very interesting time. And Thierry Boutsen comes into the pits for his second scheduled pit stop. So Thierry Boutsen, the race leader, into the pits for the second and final time. So no problem at all for him, as Brundle goes into the side of Irvine. And Brundle forces his way past the Ligier. Well, that'll be an interesting debate afterwards. So Martin Brundle gets in front of Eddie Irvine. Gerhard Berger, P5, closing up on Mika Hakkinen, as Thierry Boutsen has more than enough time to get into and out of the pit lane with the lead still intact, and he does indeed. So Thierry Boutsen in the Porsche Williams, still leading. Mansell second in the Ferrari, third is Barrichello's Tyrrell, and this is the battle for fourth at the moment, because we've got Mika Hakkinen and Gerhard Berger, nose to tail, fighting for fourth. There's Barrichello, the Brazilian, chasing after Mansell. Of course, it'll be an all-Brazilian Porsche Williams lineup next season, because Senna is going to be joined in that car by Gilles de Ferran, who's going to be part of the team. An interesting scenario for them. And there is Mansell trying to get well clear, as Eric Bernard very nearly costs Mansell dearly there. Mansell and the Ferrari gets through without issue. Here's Barrichello in the Tyrrell, third position, and into the pits comes the Lotus of Paul Warwick. Paul Warwick, who's chasing a Grand Prix deal next year. Derek Warwick is likely to be in the world of sports car racing next season. He keeps telling his younger brother Paul he should be making his bid for Formula 1. And Berger up the inside line gets the job done on Mika Hakkinen's Brabham. So Gerhard Berger looking strong again in the McLaren. They've clearly come into this race a little bit long term in terms of their focus and their strategy. So Berger getting a third position finish. He's still got a good chance of becoming champion this year himself. Never mind Nannini, Berger could still fight for the championship with 3 races to go after this one, and 45 points on the board just in races. But then there's that bonus point for the pole position and the bonus point for fastest lap as well. So there's still about 51 points left after this race in the championship fight. It could still go anybody's way. And that's what we like. Grand Prix championship that goes down to the wire. On board with Bernard, trying to chase down Alessandro Nannini in the McLaren. He's just been lapped by the Tyrrell of Rubens Barrichello, who's trying desperately to stay with this man, Il Leone, Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari. Looking to be the strongest of the championship contenders in this race now. Second place, 12 points on the board, as he passes Ayrton Senna's beached Porsche Williams that had that engine failure on the back straight. Very disastrous scenes for Ayrton Senna. So Mansell, 16 seconds down to this man, Thierry Boutsen, who is being held up by Alessandro Nannini. Now this is fascinating. Nannini, of course, is fighting for the championship. Thierry Boutsen is no longer in contention for it. But this is fascinating. Boutsen in the Porsche Williams being held up by Nannini, who finally gets out of the way, and the McLaren is down in 11th position, as we know, and out of the points. So Nannini being overtaken by the Porsche Williams to have a lap put on it. A rather depressing moment for Alessandro Nannini. There's Mika Hakkinen, who is Benetton bound next year, alongside the young Scottish rookie David Coulthard, who will get his Grand Prix debut, no doubt, in the first race of the 1992 World Championship. Here's Rubens Barrichello. Third position at the moment, as we ride on board with Mika Salo, making a very decent lunge on the Honda. Into the chicane of all places as well. So Mika Salo, who is currently lined up as a test and reserve driver for next year, signed a contract. They may want to upgrade him. He certainly seems to be a fairly decent young pair of hands. So Thierry Boutsen out through the left-hander, hugging the apex, trying to get the most out of the Porsche Williams while he's got it in his hands. He won't have it for much longer, of course. He's only got this race and then the remaining 3 before he goes to captain the Arrows team next year, alongside the Dutchman Arie Luijendijk, who is now right up in P7, I notice. The Arrows driver keeping it nice and tidy. All that experience in the IndyCar world has clearly given Arie Luijendijk a lot to be happy with. Here's Nigel Mansell, second place in the Ferrari. Lap 43 we're on now of 69. So definitely getting towards the more forceful end of the Grand Prix. Plenty of stuff still to come though. It'll be really interesting to see who gets the better of these fuel strategies, because 2-stop versus 3-stop seems to be the order of the day, and Mansell has gone for what looks like an aggressive 2-stop. Rubens Barrichello has gone for an even more aggressive 3-stop. Boutsen's on a 2-stop and looking perfectly tidy up front, as Mika Hakkinen goes into the final hairpin, still in P4, only putting 3 seconds so far on Gerhard Berger, who obviously wants to score some decent points for McLaren. It is going to be a tough old race, this one, right to the bitter end. On board the Brabham Ilmor of Mika Hakkinen. A lot of rumours flying around about this team. Brabham potentially putting the team even up for sale. They've had a miserable 91 season. And with the Ilmor engines, there's a potential for a Mercedes deal. And of course, Mercedes' current race program in Grand Prix racing is run by the Sauber Mercedes team in the Group C Sports Car Championship. There's all sorts of rumours that that team might go from being Brabham to Sauber in, if not 92, certainly in 93. The Mercedes do want to have a more active role on the Grand Prix grid, especially after their tough battles in sports car racing. The team that, of course, gave us the likes of Carl Wendlinger, Heinz-Harald Frentzen and young Michael Schumacher. So Michele Alboreto trying to work his Lotus further forward, 13th position at the moment. Only Badua and Reuter are behind him at the moment. As Nigel Mansell continues in the Ferrari, he's pulled about half the length of the straight on Rubens Barrichello, and I'm very impressed, I have to say, with Barrichello's pace here in the Tyrrell. He's really made Nigel Mansell work for this second place. Mansell was the one who went under pressure. He obviously had a mechanical issue. As Mika Hakkinen comes into the pits, that will drop him back behind Berger, Salo and probably Luijendijk as well, I would have thought. Might just drop behind Salo, actually, thinking about it. As Thierry Boutsen in the Porsche Williams continues to lead the Spanish Grand Prix of 1991, but he locks up at the hairpin. Careful, Thierry. Don't overcook it. Oh, he doesn't have that big a lead after his pit stop over Mansell. Only 4 seconds over the Ferrari. He obviously went heavy on the fuel load to try and get to the end of the race. Mansell might have one more stop left in him in the Ferrari, but you cannot afford to make a mistake like that. Look at that. Boutsen has lost a second to Mansell making that mistake. And Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari putting him under big pressure. Rubens Barrichello in third place, waiting in the wings if anything were to cook up between them. As Ardy Leyendijk brings the Arrows BMW flat out through the far part of the course. Up the crest, hug the apex, get back on the power. Really start to push and stretch the car forward. There's rumours about where BMW is going to end up on the Grand Prix grid next year, if they'll even have a presence. Because they were, of course, in the back of the Arrows, but Repco is going to be the engine power for Arrows next season in their collaboration deal with Tyrrell. Mika Salo's got a big pressure cooker now. He is in front of Häkkinen, so it's the battle of the flying Finns. It's Mika versus Mika, Salo versus Häkkinen, Ligier versus Brabham. So what can Mika Häkkinen, the reigning world champion, do to take on Mika Salo? At the moment, he's not quite close enough to get past the rookie. So Mika Salo and Mika Häkkinen, both touted as real superstar drivers. Mika Häkkinen, of course, already is a world champion, won the title last year as a rookie. And Mika Salo making his debut today in the Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez. So that battle will be fascinating between Salo and Häkkinen. We might need to pick that one up again a bit later, as Boutsen still holds only a 3-second advantage now over the Ferrari of Nigel Mansell. But this is a race that's had a lot of attrition in it already. We're past the half-distance mark, and we're about to get to 2/3 distance of the Grand Prix now. There is Thierry Boutsen in the Porsche Williams, trying to get away from Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari. He's got 3 seconds on him, but that's not a lot in Grand Prix racing. As he comes through, if you look in the background, you'll see the Ferrari. There it is. There's Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari, trying to close up on Thierry Boutsen. This fight is going to the wire as Häkkinen makes his bid on Mika Salo in the hairpin. Job done. No worries for the Brabham. He gets ahead of young Mika Salo. And so Häkkinen puts the Brabham into P5. There's Rubens Barrichello, only 8 seconds back. And Mansell is catching Boutsen. I can tell you that. Mansell in the Ferrari is gaining ground on Thierry Boutsen in the Porsche Williams. There's Naoki Hattori in the Honda. Just one Honda left in this race, of course. Going to get some really big manufacturers on the grid next year, aren't we? Peugeot, Renault, Honda, Ford with the Aston Martin badge. Rumours are still going around about BMW, maybe even Mercedes. It'll be a fabulous season in the next season, 1992. Going off the turn again, Thierry Boutsen. And Nigel Mansell, 2.8 seconds. Mansell chipping away, a 1/10 of a second here, a 1/10 of a second there. Really trying to chase down Thierry Boutsen to get the victory in the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix. And Mansell pushing hard behind Boutsen. Through the pair of right-handers. Down to the braking zone again. It all looks neat and tidy. We're at 2/3 distance, 46 laps into this race of 69. And Mansell is pushing. He's taking a 1/10 of a second out of Boutsen every single sector at the moment. So he's on average about 2 to 3/10 of a second quicker than the Williams per lap. But Boutsen is giving it everything he's got. He needs to, because Mansell is throwing caution to the winds here in the Ferrari. 2.5 the gap comes down to. Boutsen locks up under big pressure from Mansell. This is nail-biting stuff in the Spanish Grand Prix. Thierry Boutsen only leads Mansell by 2.5 seconds. The Porsche Williams vulnerable. We already saw Senna retire from the race, but the Ferrari's vulnerable too. We saw Michael Schumacher pull off after only 9 laps. So Thierry Boutsen under pressure from Nigel Mansell, 2.5 seconds in it. This is the man who could reap the benefits of one of them or both of them having a problem. The Tyrrell of Rubens Barrichello, the teenager, having a sensational race season, replacing Jean Alesi mid-year after Jean Alesi broke contract protocols. And so the Tyrrell team decided that they were fed up with Jean Alesi playing silly games with them. And so he's joined the Renault outfit a little bit early. The Peugeot outfit a little bit early. He's finishing the sports car season in the Group C Peugeot to get ready for next season, as has Alain Prost, incidentally. They're currently doing some sports car racing together before they step it up together with Peugeot as teammates. Eric Bernard trying to get the Lamborghini into the points. Only 3 places away from that. Only Nannini in the McLaren and Alboreto in the Lotus stands between them and a particular battle then once again in the points. And there's Barrichello in the Tyrrell. 7 seconds back. The gap between Mansell and Boutsen is under 2 seconds now. 1.7 seconds between Mansell and Boutsen. I really want to be looking at the battle for the lead because Mansell is closing right up on Thierry Boutsen. And surely the Belgian could come under fire here from the Brit. Mansell in the Ferrari really starting to make gains now on Thierry Boutsen. Barrichello third in the Tyrrell. Then Berger in the McLaren, Hakkinen in the Brabham, and sixth place Salo in the Ligier. But is that Luyendyk getting up the inside line to make the move on him? Oh no, sorry, Luyendyk is going through the traffic. He's lapping back markers at the moment, Arie Luyendyk. That's an arrows, still looking good for 7th place in front of Irvine as Mika Salo in the Ligier comes into the pits. Mansell, 1.6 back from Boutsen. Not much in it now at all. See just how hard Mansell in the Ferrari is working. There is Boutsen. He's really pushing hard here. He wants to get this Grand Prix victory. He wants to get the World Championship title. He wants to take a step closer to getting in the history books. Nigel Mansell really determined to give Great Britain their first world champion in Grand Prix racing since James Hunt in 1976. As into the pits comes Barrichello for his third and final stop. So he will drop from 7 seconds back to just behind Berger, I think. But long term, the Tyrrell has got a good race strategy here. He's only 8 seconds back from the leader at the pit stop. So keep an eye on Barrichello. He's the danger man here. Now Chiatori in the Honda will need to get out of the way of Irvine's Ligier, which he does just. For the Honda, now Chiatori, I think he's currently dead last in the race now as Eric Bernard brings the Lamborghini into the pits. Barrichello exits pit lane in P4, just ahead of Hakkinen. 1.4 seconds now between Boutsen and Mansell. Mansell just chipping away at the advantage that the Porsche Williams has. The gap comes down to less than a second and a half. 20 laps to go in the Spanish Grand Prix. So tough, so tight. The gap is very, very close indeed as Luyendyk comes into the pits in the Arrows. So Luyendyk will drop back into position again. And that's Hakkinen! Hakkinen in the Brabham is going to go out. Engine failure. So that's game over for Brabham. Certainly for Mika Hakkinen. Reuter is still going, but he's a long way out of contention. So Hakkinen retires in the Brabham. That's a top 5 finish, well and truly gone. And that's great news for Rubens Barrichello because it means he doesn't have to try and overtake him. As Thierry Boutsen goes in. Mansell comes in for his final pit stop. Mansell's in the pits. Here we go. Right, this needs to be a quick stop. So Mansell did all the hard work to close in on Boutsen, but he did have one more pit stop in the can. And it's 8.9. That's a great stop from Mansell. So now he's got to do all that hard work to close up on Thierry Boutsen again. I think Boutsen was on a 2-stop strategy. So Boutsen might be able to go the distance here. But if he doesn't, then Mansell is right there for the taking. Mika Salo, meanwhile, has just made the overtaking move on Paul Warwick. So Mika Salo passing another fellow rookie driver, Paul Warwick, in the Lotus. And that puts the Ligier into P7. Very impressed indeed with Mika Salo in the second half of this race. Once the attrition started, he really came alive. Now, speaking of coming alive, Gerhard Berger, third position in front of Rubens Barrichello. But Barrichello is pushing the Austrian. McLaren versus Tyrrell. As they come over the top of the crest, Rubens Barrichello's not going to be giving Gerhard Berger any gap. He doesn't have to. He doesn't care that he's not in the championship fight. He's putting on a show. And Rubens Barrichello, will he be the last of the late breakers? No, even Barrichello's not going to be as immature as to throw it up the inside with a last-ditch manoeuvre. And there's Mansell after his pit stop on board with Barrichello. Let's listen in. Barrichello blends off the power. He rolls off the power a little bit just to give himself some breathing space on Berger. So that he can have another attack of him. Out to the chicane. Not close enough yet. Patience. Taking his time, Rubens Barrichello. He might get a chance into the final turn as there is Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari in the final corner. Trying to charge his way forward. He's just put a lap on the Lotus there of Michele Alvaretto, I do believe. So all going well for Nigel Mansell as he continues. Having a very smooth race of things in second position. Looking good for 12 championship points, even if he doesn't catch and pass Thierry Boutsen. There's Martin Brundle in the Benetton. Long gone his teammate Mark Blundell. who is actually in communication, I'm told, with the Mazda sports car team. There were some wild rumours a while ago that Mazda were going to have a look at Grand Prix racing themselves, but so far none of that has materialised. Certainly Martin Brundle is going to be in a new berth next season. Thierry Boutsen battling away in the Porsche Williams, taking it nice and tidy. Careful. As Paul Warwick overshoots in the hairpin, having just lost out to Mika Salo, he now makes a mistake. But this is a very good run so far from young Paul Warwick, doing a great job thanks to a lot of coaching and guidance from his older brother Derek, who is here this weekend, but very much in support of Paul. Derek Warwick even hinted that with Paul Warwick on the scene, they don't need Derek anymore. So whether or not they decide to keep Paul for the rest of the season and then offer him a race drive at Lotus, or even a reserve drive to get ready for a full-time drive, well, we'll have to see. But Paul Warwick is certainly turning into a bit of a superstar himself. Nigel Mansell, the gap comes down to 22 seconds with 17 laps to go. Mansell on fresher tyres. And here comes the move from Leyendijk to get past Alessandro Nannini. Leyendijk in the Arrows overtakes Nannini in the McLaren. What is happening to Alessandro Nannini in this race? Championship contender, and he's just nowhere. No pace with the McLaren at all. He's in danger of losing out to Alboreto in the Lotus, and even maybe this man, Luca Badua, in the Arrows. So Alessandro Nannini really struggling. So still the battles rage on and on and on. As we now have just 17 laps left of the Spanish Grand Prix. And into the pits comes Eddie Irvine in the Ligier for his final pit stop. Irvine is likely to rejoin quite a long way back. Barrichello's into third, by the way. Barrichello's got past Berger. So Barrichello's into third place in the Tyrrell. We didn't see where it happened, but Barrichello has got the move as Nannini gets out of the way of Boutsen, who laps him for 10th position. Well, Nannini now overtakes Irvine, who is in pit lane. But still, Nannini, this is not the kind of race that Alessandro Nannini, a champion in waiting, should be having at the wheel of the McLaren, down in 9th position. Really tough race for the Italian. As Nigel Mansell, the gap comes down to 21.9 at the last sector. What is it now? 21.3. Mansell is charging again. So he's got fresher tyres on that car, and he can throw caution to the winds. The car is a little bit fresher after a breather. So Nigel Mansell eating up the road. We're on board with Mika Salo, now in P5. He's just got ahead of Martin Brundle in the Benetton. So Mika Salo, P5 in the Ligier. What a debut for him. If he can keep that going and get a decent points finish, it'll all go well for him. As Nigel Mansell pushes. He's gone off! Mansell goes off! Mansell's gone off, he's crashed it and loses the wheel. Mansell is out. I cannot believe it. Nigel Mansell throws away the Spanish Grand Prix here in Jerez. Nigel Mansell throws it all away. Look, he just got a little bit too wide, throws the car in, loses the wheel, and he's out. Nigel Mansell, a major hammer blow in the championship fight. 12 points that could have been 15 points evaporate, and the pressure's off at Williams. No points for Ferrari in Spain. Absolutely catastrophic for Ferrari. Nigel Mansell throws it away, chasing and pushing Boutsen. We were not sure who was going to make the mistake, whether it was going to be Thierry Boutsen or Nigel Mansell, and it was Mansell who cracked under the pressure. So now Boutsen leads Barrichello in the Tyrrell and Berger in the McLaren. What a dramatic Spanish Grand Prix this is turning out to be. So Thierry Boutsen, out of contention for the Drivers' Championship, leads Rubens Barrichello out of contention for the Drivers' Championship, with this man, Gerhard Berger, in the hunt for the championship, looking likely to be the biggest point scorer of them all. And of course, Mansell's crash means that Salo is up to 4th in the Ligier, Brundle is up to 5th in the Benetton, and Paul Warwick in the Lotus is P6, ahead of Leyendijk, Nannini, Irvine, and the Lotus of Alboreto. What a dramatic Grand Prix. Senna out, Schumacher out, Mansell out, Nannini down in 8th, and Berger in 3rd position. This is a real turn up for the books. As far as the championship fight is concerned, well, it's stalemate. The battle is going to continue on and rumble on to the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. No champion yet, certainly no clear leader in the championship fight. I think with the third place finish, Berger might just take the lead of the championship by a point or two as Mick Asalo gets past the Eurobrun. What a debut this is for the Finn. 4th position in the Ligier. Stefano Modena, 17th in the Lola. Although, of course, I'm fairly sure there's only 16 cars in the race now with Mansell's retirement. So Bernard is going to be promoted up to 12th place. Manuel Reuter in the Brabham is going to be 13th. Naoki Hattori, 14th place in the Honda. And then it's going to be... I'm trying to make out who would be next in the Rhino. As Manuel Reuter is slowing. Reuter in the Brabham is slowing. Engine failure for the Ilmor. So that's double engine failure then at Brabham. Both the Ilmors have gone up in smoke here in Spain. No points for Brabham. They weren't really on for points for Manuel Reuter anyway. But that's a devastating end to the race for the Brabham team. Hakkinen was looking good for a top 5 finish. Could even have been a podium with Mansell retiring from the race. As Rubens Barrichello is now in 2nd position for Tyrrell. And we now have a phenomenal just 15 cars remaining in the race. Stefano Modena 2 laps down after his big off in the Lola earlier. But just 15 cars remain. Boutsen, Barrichello, Berger and Salo. Then Brundle, Paul Warwick, Ari Lyondike, Alessandro Nannini, Eddie Irvine and Michele Alboreto. And then we've got Luca Badua 11th place in the Arrows in front of Eric Bernard in the Modena Lamborghini. Naoki Hattori in the Honda, Eddie Chiva in the Eurobrun and Stefano Modena in the Lola. And that's all we've got left. What a dramatic Spanish Grand Prix this has been so far. Schumacher out, Senna out, Mansell out. And all the championship contenders not looking likely to get a Grand Prix victory here. It looks like it's going to be Boutsen on his comeback in the Porsche Williams. That'll be delightful news for Scott Woodwis and the Williams team. Looking good for a run at the Constructors' Championship. There is Stefano Modena, 2 laps down and having a very tough race of it. So it's all been rather dramatic at the moment. But it's looking really good at the moment for Williams, for Tyrrell in particular, and for the McLaren team, who have been thrown a lifeline really by some of the attrition in this race. Gerhard Berger looking good for 3rd position in the Spanish Grand Prix of 1991. Paul Warwick runs a little bit wide in the Lotus, gets out of the way of Thierry Boutsen. So Paul Warwick now in 6th position. Look at Thierry Boutsen. He has lapped the entire field up to Martin Brundle in the Benetton in 5th position as Eric Bernard locks up in the Modena. So the Lamborghini currently running in 12th position. Likely to become Lamborghini Grand Prix for next season from what we're told. It'll be known as the Martini Lamborghini Grand Prix team. And they're really stepping it up. They've obviously been learning over the course of these last couple of seasons and now they really want some success. So it'll be fascinating to see what they can do. Thierry Boutsen in the Porsche Williams as Martin Brundle is trying not to be lapped by Thierry Boutsen. Works his way forward as we've got Honda versus Eurobrun again on the main straight. Eddie Chiva trying to take on Naoki Hattori. Bit of a rerun of the qualifying sprint. As Thierry Boutsen in the Williams is just 12 laps away from winning the Spanish Grand Prix here at Jerez in 1991. What a return to form after his several races of suspension. Getting himself back into the car, at which point he lost the Williams drive to Gilles de Ferran, his replacement. Thierry Boutsen then signing a deal with Arrows for next season. He'll be the captain of their ship, and the Arrows team will be very hopeful that they'll get this version of Thierry Boutsen rather than the version that got suspended earlier in the season. Look at Thierry Boutsen, just such a smooth drive from the Belgian. A lot of people wrote off Thierry Boutsen a couple of years ago. They said he's a smooth driver, but he doesn't really have the killer instinct. Porsche Williams thought he did, and they were right. Thierry Boutsen doing a grand job. On board with Eddie Chiva. Hustling Naoki Hattori in the Honda. This is the battle for 13th place, but it's also a little bit of pride amongst the teams that came through from pre-qualifying. But the car in front of both of them is the Modena Lamborghini, which seems to have a really good race car compared to these two, the Honda and the Eurobrun, because Bernard is quite a way in front. As Thierry Boutsen is now coming up to lap the Eurobrun and the Honda for the 2nd time. That's the difference in the pace between the pre-qualifiers and the top 10 teams. Eddie Irvine is trying to put Alessandro Nannini under some pressure. So Irvine, after his off earlier on, having to make up for lost ground. So too, of course, is Alessandro Nannini after his. Both Nannini and Irvine having a mistake-filled race each. Their teammates are up in third and fourth. There is Gerhard Berger in the McLaren, looking good to put himself into a prominent position in the championship fight. And there goes Eddie Cheever. Cheever just flies completely off the road. Manages to rejoin. Oh, how close was he to clipping Eddie Irvine's Ligier? Eddie Cheever. That was a daring return to the circuit, and he so nearly went into the side of the Ligier. Well, I think the officials need to have a word with him after that, as Eddie Cheever very nearly ran the gauntlet there and ran out of luck. So Gerhard Berger in the McLaren, third position, looking good for a podium, and that will certainly help out his championship aspirations, as his main rivals, both Ferraris and Ayrton Senna in the Williams, have all retired from this race. Now Ghiattori, as the pressure of Eddie Cheever no longer being on his tail, very much gone for the moment. But it is fascinating, isn't it? In the qualifying sprint race, the Honda and the Eurobrun were significantly quicker than the Martini Lamborghini of the Modena team. And in the race, Eric Bernard has actually been better in the Grand Prix than either Naoki Hattori or Eddie Cheever have been. But then how much longer has Eddie Cheever really sizably got in the world of Grand Prix racing? He must be thinking his days can't be very far from over in the world of Grand Prix racing. He's been a prolific driver throughout the 1980s, of course, and 1991, the latter stages of his Grand Prix career, surely. Gerhard Berger still trying to get that McLaren onto the rostrum, still looking good at the moment to do that in third position, over half a minute ahead of Mika Salo as we ride with Arie Luyendyk in P6 in the Arrows. Steady points going his way at the moment, and it looks as though Alessandro Nannini has moved up into 7th place. He's got ahead of Paul Warwick, I think, in the Lotus. So Nannini has suddenly found his way into P7, so more points on the board then for the McLaren, and they do need them. Certainly Nannini could do with a few points to keep the championship lead. This five-way fight for the title between the two McLarens, the two Ferraris and Ayrton Senna in the Williams is going to go down to the wire. 5 drivers in the championship fight. 10 laps to go here in Spain, and this man, Thierry Boutsen, is lapping Martin Brundle in the Benetton. And Brundle, of course, is in 5th position. Although for how much longer? Because that's Arie Luyendyk right behind him. And then it's Nannini. And then it's Paul Warwick, who is falling into the clutches of Irvine. So there could be quite a bit of a shuffle of the deck here for 5th position. Brundle under some big pressure. Here's Irvine chasing down Paul Warwick, trying to make his move into turn 1. Not going to take the gamble. Lots of overtaking moves could be coming from 5th down to 9th. And Michele Alboreto is there in 10th position, a few seconds down the road as well, to get that final championship point on the board. If he doesn't do it, then the Arrows driver Luca Badoer could be the one who gets it done. Action all the way to the finish line here in the 1991 Grand Prix World Championship, brought to you by Racing Voice, XL5 Media and Micropros. Gerhard Berger down to the first hairpin. Looking good. Just 11 seconds back from Barrichello. He doesn't need to push the car. Third position would do, especially when his main rivals in the championship are all either out or behind him. And Luyendyk has got ahead of Brundle. I can tell you that. Arie Luyendyk has moved into 5th position and got ahead of Martin Brundle. So the Arrows is now P5. No wonder they've signed with Arie Luyendyk next season. And this man, Thierry Boutsen. Arrows looking like they've got a strong lineup for next year. So Boutsen has lapped his future teammate. But Arie Luyendyk in the background, there he is. He's taken full advantage of the squabble. Got ahead of Brundle, and now Nannini is going to try and take on Martin Brundle as well. So as Thierry Boutsen comes out of the final turn and down the straight, there are 8 laps to go in the Spanish Grand Prix. And I think Nannini is going to try and have a go at Martin Brundle before too long. There's Rubens Barrichello, second in the Tyrrell. So impressive, Rubens Barrichello. Surely the next Brazilian to become a world champion. Oh, that's Luyendyk! Engine goes! Ah. Oh. All that hard work for Arie Luyendyk. Up into 5th position, had done a great job, and it all goes up in smoke. So Arie Luyendyk, points gone for Arrows. And that was a big points haul going their way as well. 5th position, ahead of the likes of Brundle, Nannini, Irvine, Paul Warwick. That would have been a big points haul for Arrows. Big disaster. The BMW engine gives up on him. suppose the Arrows team will probably be rather relieved that they've got the new Repco engine coming next year. They've clearly signed with them on purpose. BMW clearly not giving them what they need. That's devastating bad luck for Arie Luyendyk, who had driven so beautifully up to that point in the race. And so then there were 14 cars remaining in the Spanish Grand Prix of 1991. Thierry Boutsen in the Porsche Williams leads from Rubens Barrichello, the young superstar in the Tyrrell, ahead of Gerhard Berger in the McLaren. Mika Salo, 4th place on his debut in the Ligier. That is so impressive. Ahead of Nannini, who's now P5 for McLaren. Decent points on the board in the end for Nannini. He got lucky. You make your own luck in Grand Prix racing, so Nannini getting back into the top 5, that really helps with his championship attack. Irvine P6 for Ligier. 7th for Brundle in the Benetton, because Irvine's got ahead of Brundle. Paul Warwick in the Lotus is not far away either, so he could go up to 7th place if Brundle can't hold it together, as here comes Rubens Barrichello in the Tyrrell. Stefano Modena lets him go. No point fighting with the man who's 2 laps down, as Boutsen locks up on the top of the hill. Thierry, do not overcook the car now. You've got a golden victory lined up here as he passes his teammate's car, Ayrton Senna, who had the mechanical problem earlier on. You kind of feel that without the mechanical problems, Ayrton Senna would have won this championship, probably already by now. But the attrition rate of this sport can be cruel. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it continues on. And we ride on board with Gerhard Berger. Berger just trying to finish off this race in front start. A 3rd place finish would really do his championship aspirations no end of good. Nannini, his teammate, down in 6th position now. So Nannini's lost the position to Irvine in the Ligier. So the Ligiers are going to be 4th and 5th. This is great news for team principal Will Knight, who's obviously done the deal to be in collaboration with Bugatti next season. Fabulous opportunity then for Ligier. Big points on the board coming for Salo and Irvine. And what a drive from Mika Salo. They've got a big decision to make for next year. Do they promote him into a race drive for 1992? Based on this debut, there could be quite a few teams going after him. And of course, even though you've signed a testing contract, if someone offers a race deal at you, you find a very fast way to get out of your testing contract. Gerhard Berger. 3rd position, chasing down the Lotus. That is, I believe, Michele Alboreto. He's now up to 9th position, and up to 10th is the other Arrows of Luca Badoer. So even though one of them isn't going to score points now for Arie Luyendyk, who dropped out of P5, there's a very strong chance for Luca Badoer to score his first championship point in Grand Prix racing in 10th position. 6 laps to go. There is Rubens Barrichello, 22 seconds back from Thierry Boutsen. He's just got to hope, really, that something happens to the Porsche Williams up front. That's the only way he's really going to get the victory, as Hattori and Cheever are still battling. Let's give a bit of kudos here to Eddie Cheever. He lost so much time when he went off earlier on, and now he's caught up with Naoki Hattori already. It's a great try from Eddie Cheever to get that time made up again. And considering that this is a car that's supposed to be subpar compared to the Honda, Eurobrunn and the Ford team, the future looks bright for them next season when they join forces and become the Ford team. They're splitting with Eurobrunn, who are going to be focusing more on their sports car racing campaign, although there is a rumour that once Ford takes over the team, Eurobrunn may purchase another team and keep on the grid in some capacity. But certainly the Brunn sports car outfit in the Sports Car World Championship will definitely be still a factor. Down to the braking zone. Gerhard Berger still trying to bring this car home in 3rd position. There's Rubens Barrichello. 5 laps from the finish now for the Tyrrell team. And Rubens Barrichello looking to bank another 12 points on the board for 2nd position as we ride with Mika Salo. What a great drive from the rookie. 4th position so far. If he can just hold this together, that'll be an amazing debut. And suddenly he becomes a real star in the driver's market. He becomes a real linchpin of some of these moves from 1992. So through they go again. Onto the far side of the course. But Thierry Boutsen is coming through the chicane for the 65th time. At the end of this lap, he'll have just 4 more to go. And then he and Porsche Williams will have triumphed in the Spanish Grand Prix. But as we saw in the qualifying sprint earlier on, We saw for Adrian Fernandez, he had led the majority of the second half of the race, and then the race got taken away from him as Nannini locks up in the hairpin in the McLaren. Irvine well and truly pulled clear of the McLaren now. So there's got to be some kind of explanation from Alessandro Nannini and McLaren as to why Nannini has been so off the boil. Doesn't ring true, does it, for a driver of Nannini's calibre, the man who won the Italian Grand Prix just 2 races ago. And here he is down in 6th, a lap adrift from Thierry Boutsen. But here is Rubens Barrichello. So much potential from this young man in the Tyrrell squad. He'll be staying with the team next year, as will his teammate Heinz-Harald Frentzen, whose car he passes now, having dropped out of the race earlier on. But this has a real potential to be a dark horse for 92. If that Repco engine is as good as they are expecting it to be, then the Tyrrell team could have a really strong year in 92. They've already had a very strong year in 91 with Barrichello and Frentzen, right on board with the Porsche Williams of Thierry Boutsen. Into that chicane again for the 66th lap. 3 laps to go at the end of this one. Are there going to be 15 points on the board for Williams anyway, even though they're not for Ayrton Senna? They could well be for Thierry Boutsen. They could well be for Porsche Williams. With Tyrrell in 2nd, McLaren in 3rd, and Ligier 4th and 5th. Some big points coming for Tyrrell and Ligier today in a race that's been full of attrition. Some of the big names from this race have fallen by the wayside. It's been a really exciting race, and certainly in terms of the championship, this is going to go down to the wire. Barrichello just guiding it through the hairpin. 3 laps to go. And still that battle in front of him is Hattori in 12th and Chiva in 13th. Honda versus Eurobrunn. It's the battle of the qualifying sprint all over again. But what a race battle it's turning into. Excellent stuff as they continue their march to glory. Tyrrell team in 2nd place. Berger across the line. 3 to go for him now in the McLaren. 40 seconds back from the Porsche Williams. It shows you how fast the Williams is when it's on a very strong run. But they did have pressure today from both Ferraris. Michael Schumacher and Nigel Mansell both put them under pressure until both Ferraris went. Michael Schumacher had a mechanical problem, and Nigel Mansell pushing too hard, trying to close up on Thierry Boutsen, dropping the Ferrari and crashing out of the Spanish Grand Prix. Who knows how close he could have got to the Porsche Williams. He might even have taken the victory here, and that would have certainly put him into the fight for the championship lead. It's going to be a nail-biter all the way to the final race of the season in Adelaide, the way things are currently stacking up. We're going to have a real thriller for the World Championship. Rubens Barrichello tightening up. He's got ahead of the Honda. He now needs to get ahead of the Eurobrunn. 2 laps to go as Stefano Modena does not need another off. He very nearly overshot there in the Lola. He's worked his way to 14th. He's a few seconds behind Naoki Hattori, but he's not going to get out of last place, I'm afraid, which on this occasion is going to be 14th. Very disappointing day at the office for Lola after Gianni Morbidelli. I mean, goodness me, Gianni Morbidelli, he retired from 5th position. He could have been 3rd by now. He was mixing it with Barrichello and Berger at one stage of the race. So Morbidelli could have been on for a podium, if not 4th position, probably would have been at the very worst had he kept going in the Lola. You can say that about several drivers in this field. Meanwhile, Eric Bernard has caught and passed Luca Badua in the Arrows. It looks like the Modena Lamborghini team, out of pre-qualifying, are going to score a championship point. Great work from Modena Lamborghini and from Eric Bernard, who have completely outclassed both Eurobrunn and Honda in the Grand Prix itself, despite losing to them in the qualifying sprint. They've clearly got a better race car for the Grand Prix than they do for the qualifying sprint. And Eric Bernard is going to give the Modena Lamborghini team 1 championship point if he just keeps it together, as Thierry Boutsen goes into the hairpin for the penultimate time down the main straight, and Thierry Boutsen goes into the final lap of the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix for Porsche Williams. You never count your chickens before they hatch in the RRML. You certainly don't in the Grand Prix World Championship of 1991. Rubens Barrichello, 2nd position in the Tyrrell as Michele Alboreto pushing hard in the Lotus, trying to close up on his teammate Paul Warwick, but it does look as though the young whippersnapper is going to beat the experienced hand, Michele Alboreto, who of course joins Renault next season to captain their Works factory effort. But what an incredible turn of events in this Grand Prix. Schumacher retired, Senna retired. Mansell crashed out and retired. And now it's going to be Thierry Boutsen on his comeback after several races out from suspension, in front of Gerhard Berger in third and Rubens Barrichello in the Tyrrell in second place. What a drive from the youngster. But the man up front is going to be our race victor, Thierry Boutsen. Surely in the Porsche Williams will get this done. Points galore from drivers in the top 10. But Thierry Boutsen, who sat out several races, Gilles de Ferran took over his seat. He will take over his Williams seat next season for Porsche Williams. But Thierry Boutsen, on his return to the RRML Grand Prix World Championship, will get to relive the whole experience of zero to hero. He comes out of the final turn, he blasts down the main straight at Jerez de la Frontera, and Thierry Boutsen and Porsche Williams win the Spanish Grand Prix of 1991. Fantastic work from Thierry Boutsen, a flawless drive today. What a way to return to the sport as the absolute conquering hero. Here comes Rubens Barrichello, second position in the Red Bull Tyrrell. Masterful drive, putting many of his contemporaries and more experienced rivals to shame. Rubens Barrichello, surely a champion in the making. But Thierry Boutsen takes the victory. And here's Gerhard Berger for the championship. This is significant, as Berger will bring the McLaren home in third position. Big points compared to his rivals. 10 more points than Senna, Schumacher and Mansell. Berger, third position. A very important result then for Gerhard Berger. And Mika Salo, on his debut for Ligier, is guaranteed fourth position. He remains on the lead lap, ahead of Irvine, Nannini, Brundle, Warwick, Alboreto and Eric Bernard, who will get the final point for Modena Lamborghini. A lot of smiles down the pit lane here today. Sadly, Luca Badua in the Arrows just misses out on a point. Chiva did get ahead of Vittori, by the way. The Eurobrun did get ahead of the Honda. And Stefano Modena will be 2 laps down in the Lola. Down in last place, but joy for Williams, for Tyrrell and for McLaren. They will be on the podium, and some big points in the offing for Thierry Boutsen. Absolutely wonderful scenes. Boutsen wins from Barrichello and Berger. It's all B's on the podium. Mika Salo fourth on his debut, ahead of Eddie Irvine, Alessandro Nannini, Martin Brundle, Paul Warwick, Michele Alboreto, and the final point going to Eric Bernard and the Modena Lamborghini. Badua, Chiva, Hattori and Stefano Modena were the final finishers in a grueling race that saw some big retirements, some big names fall by the wayside. Lion Dyke on course for a top 5. Reuter and Hakkinen, the Brabhams. Mansell crashed out while catching for the lead. Morbidelli lost big points. Suzuki and Fernandez out. Senna out while leading. Frentzen out while fighting for the victory. Schumacher, Tracy and Blundell all out of the race as well. Big disasters all round. Thierry Boutsen got the fastest lap of the race, 0.3 of a second quicker than Senna, Schumacher and Mansell. So big points then for Thierry Boutsen and the Williams team. They can be overjoyed with the way this race has gone. That's it from the RRML Grand Prix World Championship. We'll be back for more action at the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. From Jake Sanson and the whole team, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in Germany.